Part 64. The Prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 633. Chapter 631. My sister-in-law's hands are dirty. Fengwu, let me chop them off. At this time, Xiao Jinyu was not conscious. His body was as hot as a steamer. There was also a familiar feeling extending from his lower abdomen to his limbs. He found that Ian today was a little different from the past, too eager and enthusiastic. Yan is usually very enthusiastic, and even the first taste of love was brought about by her. Wan Xian finally untied the girdle and couldn't wait to untie Xiao Jinyu's clothes. As soon as the lace was untied, she was grabbed by a big hand. She raised her head and saw eyes that were darker than the night. What's wrong? Xiao Jinyu almost spent his whole life self-control to resist his impulse. After trying hard to restrain himself, his voice became hoarse and he said, "You are sick and it is not appropriate to have sex." Wan Xian was stunned when she heard this. At this juncture, Xiao Jinyu actually remembered that concubine Han was ill and could not have sex. She lowered her eyes and glanced at Xiao Jinyu's body. How did he hold back? But at this time, Wan Xian didn't have time to think about this. She put her other hand around Xiao Jinyu's neck and took the initiative to kiss him. She just wanted to consummate the marriage with Xiao Jinyu, and after the consummation, everything would be settled. Xiao Jinyu was trying to restrain himself, but now she was on fire. How could he hold it back? He grabbed her wrist and pressed her on the bed. The only rational thing left in his mind was, how could Ian, who was so sick, be able to withstand his torment? Ian, wait a moment, let's continue after you recover. After Xiao Jinyu said that, he got out of bed immediately. Due to physical reasons, his movements were not as agile as usual, but rather sluggish. As soon as she got out of bed, Wan Xian hugged her from behind, and said pitifully, "Don't go, don't you want to leave Yan? Ian, don't mess around." Xiao Jinyu felt that he might die at any time. All he could do now was to leave quickly, otherwise Ian would definitely be injured. "I'm not messing around. I want to give you a child." "Don't you like children?" Wan Xian said and continued to unbutton his robe. It was almost rare tonight. How could Xiao Jinyu leave like this? Just when Xiao Jinyu's remaining sanity disappeared, Ping'er's shouts came from the door. "Your Majesty, come out quickly." Wan Xian frowned. She didn't care about the outside at the moment and pushed Xiao Jinyu down on the bed. As the pressure of Wangzhen came up, the only clear name left in Xiao Jinyu's eyes also disappeared. As soon as Ping'er shouted, he was pushed away by Zia. "Stop shouting, the prince is with my concubine at the moment, disturbing the prince's interest, can you bear it?" Ping'er had been with concubine Han for so long, and she could see the prince's affection for concubine Han. Concubine Wan has been married for so long, but she has never seen the prince go there once. Now that concubine Han is seriously ill, how could the prince have the intention to consummate the marriage with concubine Wan? Ignoring Ziahe's obstruction, she continued to shout into the room, "Your Majesty, I have something to do and want to see your Majesty." When Xiao Jinyu was unconscious, he heard this sentence and stared at the woman on his body for a long time. Suddenly, Ian's pale face and his eyes closed flashed in his mind. Yan is so weak, how can she be so energetic? The more Xiao Jinyu thought about it, the more something was wrong, but his body refused to obey him. Like the scent of a woman in love, he couldn't help but want to get closer. "Your Majesty, the crown princess is here and wants to treat concubine Han. Please go over and take a look." Outside the house, Ping'er shouted at the top of his lungs. Xiao Jinyu now knew something was wrong. Yan was so ill that she didn't even have the strength to speak. How could she have the strength to seduce him? The woman on her body is definitely not Yan. He pushed the woman away from him, pulled out the hairpin from the jade crown, and stabbed the thigh hard. causing blood to flow. The severe pain made him conscious for a while. When Wan Xian clung to her again, he grabbed her neck and said coldly, "Don't touch me." Wan Xian looked at Xiao Jinyu in fear and opened her mouth, but because her big hands were squeezing her neck, she couldn't say a word because of the pain. Her breathing became increasingly difficult and her face turned red. She slapped the hand holding her neck hard, trying to get him to let go. Xiao Jinyu threw her on the bed, stood up impatiently and walked out. The jade crown on his head fell to the ground with his steps and broke into pieces. It's just that the effect of the medicine in his body is too strong, and the distance between the bed and the door is only a few steps, and he walks extremely slowly. Wan Xian coughed several times. Xiao Jinyu was so strong that he seemed to want to break her neck. The pain was unbearable after just a few coughs. He watched helplessly as Xiao Jinyu staggered towards the door, opened the bolt, lifted the curtain and walked out. Wan Xian bit her lip. If she loses this opportunity, it will be even more difficult in the future. Ping Er saw Xiao Jinyu coming out and greeted him, "Your Majesty, the Crown Princess is here with someone." "Go and have a look." Xiao Jinyu forced himself to continue walking forward. Ping Er followed closely behind him and saw that Xiao Jinyu was a little uncomfortable, but he didn't dare to ask. Xiao Jinyu pushed himself to Concubine Han's residence, held onto the door frame and pulled the curtain with one hand, and walked in with difficulty. Sister-in-law. Feng Wu was watching Wang Jingyuan getting ready when she heard someone calling her sister-in-law, and she knew Xiao Jinyu was here. He raised his head and looked at the door, and saw Xiao Jinyu standing there in disheveled clothes. Her first reaction was that Xiao Jinyu was doing something inappropriate for children at Wan Xian's place, and was called over by Ping Er in the middle. He was so anxious that he ran over without even tidying up his clothes. When she saw Xiao Jinyu's unclear eyes and abnormal skin color, she immediately realized that something was wrong with him. "Prince Yu, what's wrong with you?" She stood up and ran over, holding his arm. Xiao Jinyu said in a hoarse voice, "Sister-in-law, I have been drugged." In fact, Xiao Jinyu didn't say it, but Feng Wu also guessed that he had a faint fragrance on his body. The fragrance had the effect of psychedelizing people's minds, and at the same time, it also contained the ingredients of a charming drug. This kind of fragrance is a very low-grade thing. If the other person doesn't love you, after using this, the other person will treat you as his lover and have fun with you. It's more fun than ordinary love potions. "I'll help you sit down first." "Good." With Feng Wu's support, Xiao Jinyu sat down on the couch. Feng Wu smelled the smell of blood, looked down and saw a hosta stuck in Xiao Jinyu's thigh, with blood flowing all over the floor. She was shocked for a while before she uttered a sentence, "You are so cruel to yourself." Xiao Jinyu could hardly feel the pain at this time, and it was as painful as scratching his heart and liver, which made him hum, "Sister-in-law, I feel so uncomfortable, please help me." "Oh, I'll help you right away." After Feng Wu reacted, he came to the table, took out the teacup, and took the spiritual spring water from the space. It only took a few seconds. There was no outsider in the room and no one saw it. After getting the spiritual spring water, she walked to the couch with the teacup and handed it to Xiao Jinyu, "Drink it and you'll be fine." Xiao Jinyu had always believed in Feng Wu's words. After hearing this, he took the teacup with trembling hands, raised it to his mouth, raised his head and drank it all in one gulp. Feng Wu held Xiao Jinyu's hand, and his forbearance made him look more and more like Xiao Jinyan. They were worthy of being brothers. After Xiao Jinyu drank it, he realized that the medicine had no taste at all. He held up the empty teacup and looked at Feng Wu in confusion. "Sister-in-law, did you forget to put the medicine in?" Feng Wu looked at the teacup in his hand, Who would have thought that Xiao Jinyu, who was unconscious, could still notice that there was no medicine in the water? "What do you know? Some medicines are colorless and odorless, but they can detoxify," Do you understand? Xiao Jinyu nodded vigorously, I understand. Feng Guiu took the empty teacup in his hand and put it back on the table. After drinking the medicine, Xiao Jinyu could clearly feel the heat in his body fading away. His eyes became clearer and clearer, but the pain became clearer and clearer. At that time, I just wanted to restore my clarity of mind, so I didn't do anything serious, and the hosta penetrated deeply into my flesh. My legs hurt so much. It doesn't hurt, can you still walk out? Feng Guiu teased, walking over and staring at Xiao Jinyu's legs. Xiao Jinyu urged, sister-in-law, don't just look at me, help me stop the bleeding. Feng Guiu was a little embarrassed, Uncle Wang, it's not that I won't help you. There are differences between men and women. If your highness knows that I look at men's thighs. Wang Jingyuan held the bamboo tube in his hand, raised his head and looked over, and saw Feng Guiu's serious expression, the same as when he was a child. Xiao Jinyu was stunned for a moment, looking down at his thigh, which was still bleeding. He pulled out the hairpin, fearing that the bleeding would not stop. Sister-in-law, you can't just watch me bleed to death, right? He, just kidding you. Feng Guiu smiled and went to get the medicine. Xiao Jinyu secretly breathed a sigh of relief, at this time, my sister-in-law is still teasing me. Feng Guiu came over with the medicine and gauze, put the medicine on the table, then took out a dagger and neatly cut open Xiao Jinyu's pants. The pants had long been soaked with blood, and the smell of blood was very strong. Why did you suddenly go to concubine Wan? Xiao Jinyu said, I went to test her, but I didn't expect that she drugged me and wanted to take the opportunity to consummate the marriage. I didn't know when she drugged me. She and I drank the bowl of soup, and she was fine. Feng Guiu took the medicine and sprinkled it on the gauze. She lit incense in the house, so naturally your nose can't smell it. No wonder the smell in her room was a bit sweet when I entered. I thought it was just ordinary incense. Xiao Jinyu became angrier the more he thought about it, because he mistook Wan Xian for a Yan and not only hugged her, but also took off her clothes. Xiao Jinyu has been pampered and pampered since he was a child. Under the dual protection of the emperor and queen, he has never seen scheming and evil in the world. I'm not clean anymore. Xiao Jinyu's tone was full of grievances. Ever since he was a child, how had he ever experienced such grievances? As soon as he finished speaking, there was another groan. Feng Guiu pulled out the hosta and covered the wound with medicine. Xiao Jinyu looked at the weak Feng Guiu, but he didn't expect that she would pull it out without saying a word, without giving him a chance to react. Feng Guiu then raised his head and looked at Xiao Jinyu, have you consummated your marriage with concubine Wan? Xiao Jinyu's forehead was covered with sweat, and he shook his head in pain, that's not true. You have good self-control. Ordinary people would have long ago. Feng Guiu coughed twice, and as he became more familiar with Xiao Jinyu, he no longer had any scruples when speaking, and he almost spoke in modern dialect. Xiao Jinyu looked down at his own hands, the same hands that hugged Wan Xian and even touched her. Feng Guiu looked at Xiao Jinyu's actions in confusion, what's wrong? Xiao Jinyasheng asked helplessly, sister-in-law, can I still want this hand? Feng Guiu took a look at Xiao Jinyu's hands. They were the same as Xiao Jinyu's hands. They were large and beautiful with long knuckles. She suddenly thought of the story in a romance novel about a man with a mysophobia who accidentally touches someone else and starts disinfecting like crazy. Shall I disinfect you? Xiao Jinyu was a little worried, is this okay? Then I'll chop off your hands to save you from being upset, Feng Guiu said and took out the Poyu. The blade of Poyu's blade was sharp and glowed coldly under the candle light. Xiao Jinyu swallowed, and immediately retracted his hand, smiling awkwardly, it's better to keep it, a Yan needs these hands. Feng Guiu snorted, no matter how serious mysophobia is, I can cure it for you. Wang Jingyuan saw the scene and couldn't help but laugh. When Feng Guiu saw that the bleeding had stopped, he started to bandage the wound. Xiao Jinyu glanced at Wang Jingyuan. In fact, he had noticed him just now and was very surprised. Sister-in-law, who is he? Why have I never seen him before? Feng Wu introduced while bandaging. He is my friend, whom I met when we were in Nanzhao Kingdom. He is Wang Jingyuan, the third prince of the Xin Miao tribe. Xiao Jinyu was confused at first, then suddenly thought of the rumors and couldn't believe it. Xin Miao tribe. That Xin Miao tribe that is good at goo insects. That's right. After Feng Wu was bandaged, she stood up and glanced at Wang Jingyuan. Concubine Han was infected by the blood poison. Brother A1 is now preparing to remove the poison. Blood goo. Xiao Jinyu felt panicked just by hearing the name. No wonder his sister-in-law couldn't find out the reason. She was bewitched and couldn't find out. He stood up holding onto the table and limped to the bedside. Looking at a Yan who had fallen asleep, he didn't expect that he had been poisoned. Could it be Wan Xian? Why does she have blood poison? He turned to look at Feng Wu. After removing the poison, will Ian be fine? Feng Wu said, it depends on concubine Han's recovery. You also know that concubine Han's blood deficiency is serious. If she cannot make up for it in time, she will still be in danger. Xiao Jinyu looked at the person on the bed with worry in his eyes. Ian, you can't leave me behind. Feng Wu came to Wang Jingyuan and looked at the bamboo tube in his hand curiously. Brother A1, how are the preparations going? That's almost it. Wang Jingyuan came to the bed with the bamboo tube, and Xiao Jinyu immediately stepped away to give up his position. What do you need me to do? Wang Jingyuan ordered, lift the quilt and expose your arms. Okay. Xiao Jinyu took a few steps forward, sat down on the bedside, lifted the quilt, neatly unbuttoned his clothes, and then took his right arm out of his sleeves. After concubine Han lost weight, her arms were much slimmer than before. If they were any thinner, they would be no different than skinny bones. In his eyes, nothing is more important than Ian's life. After getting ready, Wang Jingyuan took out a straw dumpling made from the same herb, lit it with a candle and put it into a bamboo tube. Then he took a dagger and made a cut on concubine Han's arm. The blood flowed out instantly and flowed all the way into Xiao Jinyu's hand, which made him feel very distressed. Wang Jingyuan placed the bamboo tube on the wound, and wisps of light smoke floated on the wound. Concubine Han, who was sleeping, snorted uncomfortably. Good night, Spicy. Please support with monthly votes and recommendation votes. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 634. Xiao Jinyu saw Yan's uncomfortable look and felt uncomfortable himself. He raised his head and looked at Wang Jingyuan in confusion. Third prince, how could this happen? Wang Jingyuan explained, the blood poison will hurt when it comes out of her body. This is normal, don't worry. Xiao Jinyu felt relieved this time and looked down at Yan. Yan, if you bear with me, you will be fine soon. Concubine Han's brows frowned, but they did not get better because of Xiao Jinyu's words. Instead, her brows furrowed even more tightly, and uncomfortable moans came from her mouth from time to time. Feng Wu kept staring at concubine Han's arm. After a while, she saw several bumps bulging out of concubine Han's shoulders. The bumps were not big, as big as soybeans. At this moment, the soybean-sized bag was slowly squirming from the shoulder like a small insect. Every time several insects squirmed, concubine Han would frown and moan in pain. Xiao Jinyu also saw it, and his eyes were full of shock. It was these blood poisons that sucked Yan's blood every day, which caused her severe blood deficiency. Wang Jingyuan is a goo master and has long been used to seeing goo, so he was very calm when seeing so many blood goo. 6 blood goo, no wonder they are so powerful. It is a miracle that they can last for so long. Feng Wu said, Brother A1, if I hadn't used medicine to extend her life, I'm afraid she wouldn't have been able to last this long. No wonder it lasted so long, otherwise there would be no way to save it. Wang Jingyuan was not exaggerating. The 6 blood poisons had been in the body for such a long time, and they absorbed a lot of blood every day. Xiao Jinyu felt guilty after listening to the conversation between the two. If he hadn't only asked the imperial doctor and wasted time, Ian might not have been so serious. While talking, the first blood goo crawled out of the wound, allowing them to see the true appearance of the blood goo. The blood voodoo is as big as a soybean, and its whole body is blood red, like a blood mole. Feng Wei watched the blood goo crawl out with his own eyes, and then watched it slowly crawl into the bamboo tube, as if being pulled by something, crawling into the bamboo tube one after another. She felt it was amazing. If she had known that goo bugs were so powerful when she was a child, she would have pestered Brother Awan to learn something about it no matter what. It's not like he doesn't even know he's been infected by a poisonous insect. After the 6 goo insects crawled in, Wang Jingyuan picked up the bamboo tube and closed the lid. Okay, the worms have been eliminated. The most important thing now is to take good care of yourself. I'll bandage her wound. Feng Wei had already prepared the medicine. After Wang Jingyuan stepped away, she took 2 steps forward with the medicine and gauze and sat down on the bed. Xiao Jinyu cooperated and picked up Ian's arm so that Feng Wei could bandage the wound. Feng Wei quickly bandaged the wound with her hands and feet. The wound was not big and was quickly wrapped. Uncle Wang, give the medicine to concubine Han to drink. I'll have someone cook the medicine right now. After Xiao Jinyu finished speaking, he shouted outside, Ping-er, go cook the medicine. My slave, go right away. Ping-er responded and trotted to cook the medicine. Xiao Jinyu raised his head and looked at Feng Wei and Wang Jingyuan, saying with great gratitude, thank you for saving a yan. Wang Jingyuan smiled and said, what king you said, it's just a small effort, why bother? Feng Wei said, it's getting late. Uncle Wang, take good care of concubine Han. I'll come back to see you tomorrow. Xiao Jinyu nodded. After they came out, Feng Wei said, thankfully Brother Awan is here, otherwise he wouldn't have discovered the cause of concubine Han's blood deficiency so quickly. Brother Awan is so powerful that he got rid of the goo bug so quickly. Xiaju is already very powerful. If it weren't for you, concubine Han wouldn't have been able to hold on for so long, Wang Jingyuan said. Feng Wei smiled, then thought of Tian's illness, and the smile disappeared again. Brother Awan, has your illness been present since childhood? When she was in Nanzhao, she didn't know that Wang Jingyuan was sick, and he never mentioned his illness. If it weren't for the last time she checked Wang Jingyuan's pulse when she was in Xinmiao, she would have known that he had been ill for a long time and had been ill before going to Nanzhao. To be precise, he was poisoned. Wang Jingyuan nodded, well, I went to Nanzhao for medical treatment. Originally, I didn't want to go, but my father forced me to go. At this point, Wang Jingyuan paused and looked at Xiaju, thanks to my father's decision at that time, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to meet you. He has been poisoned since he was a child, and his father has protected him very well, afraid of being bumped or touched, like a porcelain doll. After going to Nanzhao Kingdom, I met Xiaju. I have never been so happy. Feng Wei said, no wonder you always looked pale when I first saw you. I thought that was your skin color. Wang Jingyuan thought about how Xiaoju always stared at him in the past, saying that his face was very white, and poked his face with her little finger, and asked with a serious expression, Brother Awan, are you smearing your face, got flour? Back in the East Palace, Feng Wei and Wang Jingyuan separated. When Xiao Jinyan came back, he saw that Feng Wei was still awake. Are you still awake? Feng Wei got up from the bed. Jinyan, I'm waiting for you. What's wrong? Do you want to tell me something? Xiao Jinyan walked to the bed and sat down, looking up at her. Feng Wei moved forward and reached out to hold Xiao Jinyan's arm. Jinyan, little Uncle Wang was drugged by concubine Wan today and almost lost his virginity. Xiao Jinyan has only met concubine Wan a few times and has never gotten along with her. Looking at such a gentle person, she seems to have some tricks. In this palace, drugging for favor is too normal. That means concubine Wan didn't succeed. Feng Guiu stared at Xiao Jinyan for a while, a little confused. Why don't you worry about your brother at all? Xiao Jinyan said, he is almost 20 years old. If he can't even see these little tricks, he can only blame himself. Feng Guiu had no words to refute, and simply changed the subject. By the way, concubine Han was infected with blood goo. Fortunately, brother Awan came in time today, otherwise the consequences would be disastrous. Xiao Jinyan's eyes flashed with doubt. How could there be goo insects in the palace? Feng Guiu shrugged, I don't know either. Brother Awan said that blood goo is difficult to get, and ordinary people don't have blood goo. Xiao Jinyan pondered for a while, and immediately thought of concubine Wan. It's not difficult to see that it was for you or the one who poisoned concubine Han was most likely concubine Wan. Feng Guiu felt that Xiao Jinyan's analysis made sense. Sure enough, the women in the palace were too scary. Xiao Jinyan said, rest early, it's getting late. Feng Guiu yawned, then I'll go to sleep first. After seeing her lie down, Xiao Jinyan stood up to take a bath. The next day, Susu ate wontons and small milk buns as she wished. Dabai ate whatever Susu fed him, and he was never picky about food. After breakfast, Feng Guiu went to Qiancheng Hall with Wang Jingyuan. Wang Leiwen was a little depressed. Seeing Susu and Dabai playing together, he was also a little curious. How could such a big kid not be afraid of tigers at all? Lu Liao was obviously very fierce, but he was very docile when facing Susu. However, he didn't dare to get close. Dabai didn't like her to get close. Bored, she walked out of Hehuan Hall and looked at the huge East Palace. She didn't believe that there were no other women. Qiancheng Hall. Xiao Jinyu guarded Ayan all night, and Ayan didn't wake up. When she was anxious, Feng Guiu and Wang Jingyuan came. Sister-in-law, Ayan has not woken up yet. Let me take a look. Feng Guiu came to the bed and sat down, took concubine Han's hand and began to feel her pulse. While feeling her pulse, she looked up at concubine Han and looked at her complexion. After the poisonous insects were removed, her complexion did not improve or worsen. Feng Guiu put down concubine Han's hand. Concubine Han is too weak, she needs to take supplements and rest. Xiao Jinyu asked, should I continue to take the medicine? Feng Guiu nodded, continue to take it, and wait until concubine Han's spirits get better, then you don't need to take medicine to take supplements. I know Xiao Jinyu was worried all night, and even now, he didn't dare to breathe a sigh of relief. Xiao Jinyu took care of concubine Han and didn't care about Wang Xin. Wang Xin didn't sleep all night yesterday, and her dark circles were a little serious. She sat on the couch, thinking of Xiao Jinyu stabbing her thigh with a jade hairpin last night to stay awake. Thinking of him leaving without looking back, she felt sad and unwilling. Why couldn't Xiao Jinyu look at her a few more times? How was she worse than concubine Han? Master, the prince must be angry now. When he calms down, you can coax him. Maybe he won't be angry anymore, Xiao, he said cautiously. Wan Xian clenched the handkerchief in her hand. No, I want to see the prince now. Wan Xian stood up, opened the curtain and walked out. Xiao He hurriedly followed. Wan Xian came to the side hall, but was stopped by the guards. The prince has ordered that no one is allowed to enter without his permission. Wan Xian said unwillingly, then you go and report to the prince, saying that I have something urgent to see him. Her answer was still a cold sentence, the prince has ordered that no one is allowed to disturb. Wan Xian's face turned pale. Xiao Jinyu didn't want to see her. Concubine Han woke up on the third morning. When she opened her eyes, she saw Xiao Jinyu walking in with a bowl. As he approached, a strong smell of medicine came with it, and she frowned. Xiao Jinyu walked to the bedside and found that she was awake. He immediately showed a look of surprise. "Ayan, you are finally awake." Concubine Han opened her mouth. "Have I slept for a long time?" As soon as she opened her mouth, her voice was very hoarse. "Well, you slept for 3 days." Xiao Jinyu sat down on the bed while speaking, put down the medicine bowl in his hand, helped her up and leaned on his arms, and then picked up the bowl again and handed it to her mouth to blow. "Let's drink the medicine first." Concubine Han looked at the thick black medicine juice and had an urge to vomit. She raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyu, and found that he had grown stubble after not seeing him for a few days, and the dark circles under his eyes were very serious. After Xiao Jinyu finished blowing the medicine, he found that Ayan was staring at him. "What are you looking at me for? Drink the medicine first. Only by drinking the medicine can you get better soon." Concubine Han stared at him for a long time, opened her mouth, but didn't say a word, just and then obediently drank the medicine from his hand. Xiao Jinyu took out a handkerchief to wipe the medicine juice from the corner of her mouth. "You must be hungry after sleeping for so long. I'll have someone bring the food in." Concubine Han was indeed hungry. After the food was brought in, Xiao Jinyu fed her, because Concubine Han didn't even have the strength to hold chopsticks. After eating, Concubine Han had a lot to say, but her body was too tired. After Xiao Jinyu reported that she lay flat on the bed, she began to feel drowsy. After Xiao Jinyu waited for Concubine Han to fall asleep, he called his confidant, "Go check Wangzhen." "I understand." The guard took the order and left quickly. Xiao Jinyu ordered again. Concubine Wan was so bold that she actually drugged the prince. She is confined to her house for a month and her monthly salary is also withheld. When Wan Xian learned of Xian Jinyu's order, her face looked a little ugly. "Xiao Jinyu, you are really cruel. Is Concubine Han going to die? If someone is infected with blood poisoning, there is no one to cure it, and there is only one way to go." Thinking of this, Wan Xian calmed down again. She still has a chance. Feng Guo spent a few days preparing some medicines, using the best medicinal materials. However, these medicinal materials can only alleviate but not cure Wang Jingyuan's illness, because there is more than poison in his body. The people sent out came back soon, and the result was unexpected. "Master, Concubine Wan was originally a geisha, and it was not accidental that she met the Queen Mother. I also found out that Concubine Wan is from the Xing Miao tribe." After hearing this, Xiao Jinyu's face immediately sank. It's hidden so deeply. Now that it has been found out, Xiao Jinyu went to play with Concubine immediately. "Master, the prince is here." Wan Xian looked up at the door and saw Xiao Jinyu coming. She thought that several days had passed, and Concubine Han must have died. She hurriedly stood up and saluted, "I pay my respects to the prince." Xiao Jinyu looked at Wan Xian coldly. "Concubine Wan, from today on, you are no longer the prince's concubine." Wan Xian was stunned for a moment, not understanding what he meant. "Prince, what do you mean?" Xiao Jinyu never hit a woman. Thinking that Ayan was almost killed by her, he stepped forward and kicked Wan Xian in the heart, kicking her directly and causing her to spit blood. Wan Xian's eyes went black, and the severe pain made her face look a little hideous. A geisha deliberately approached the empress and poisoned Concubine Han. "You are so scheming and vicious. This prince will divorce you today." Xiao Jinyu shouted angrily, "Come here, put her in the sky prison." Wan Xian didn't even have a chance to speak before she was dragged out by the guards. Xiao Jinyu had never thought that he would be so furious. Just thinking about how he almost lost Ayan, he wanted to kill Wangzhen directly. Death would be too easy for her. Wangzhen was imprisoned in the prison, which alarmed the Queen Mother, who called Xiao Jinyu over immediately. Looking at the white-haired empress, he stepped forward to greet her, "Grandma." The Empress Dowager saw Xiao Jinyu and asked, "I heard that you divorced Concubine Wan. Xiao Jinyu said, "Yes, Grandma, I even put her in the prison." The Empress Dowager's face changed when she heard this. Wangzhen was brought into the palace by me, and I promised her to you. Even if you don't like Wangzhen, you can't divorce her and put her in the prison. Do you still have me, the Empress, in your eyes?" Xiao Jinyu said, "Grandma did this for a reason. Wangzhen drugged me to win favor, and poisoned concubine Han out of jealousy, trying to kill her. This chapter is a bit sloppy, so just read it. But there's not much text left, and then there's the extra chapter. If you want to read someone's extra chapter, just tell me. Good night. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 635. The Queen Mother naturally didn't believe it. Did you make a mistake? How could Wan Xian do such a thing? Did you say this to protect concubine Han? Xiao Jinyu felt that the Queen Mother was getting old and confused, but it was not easy to say it in front of her, for fear of making the old lady sick. Grandma, you trust outsiders but not your own grandson. When did your grandson become so unreasonable and confuse right and wrong? Even if your grandson didn't like Wan Xian, he would not frame her without knowing right and wrong. Xiao Jinyu's tone was full of grievance. The Queen Mother was stunned, thinking of Yuer's character. She was indeed not a person who confuses right and wrong. Now seeing her grandson so aggrieved, the Queen Mother also felt that she was too arbitrary. Wan Xian doesn't look like the kind of person you said. Do you have any evidence? Of course Xiao Jinyu showed the evidence he had collected to the Queen Mother. Grandma, this is the evidence that my grandson has found. After reading the evidence, the Queen Mother's eyes were full of disbelief. Wan Xian is actually such a person. It's a pity that I love her so much. She is so scheming and so vicious. The Queen Mother was very angry, including her face. She actually misjudged her. To ease the embarrassment, she asked, "How is concubine Han?" Xiao Jinyu said, "Concubine Han has been in a coma for a long time and almost couldn't wake up. She just woke up yesterday and was very weak. The imperial doctor said that it is not known whether she can recover." Although the Queen Mother did not like concubine Han, she was very angry now that Wan Xian had harmed her like this. Wan Xian is too vicious. Send a few more imperial doctors to see concubine Han. Just tell me if you need anything. Xiao Jinyu, thank you for your concern, Grandma. Your grandson will. Xiao Jinyu returned to Qiancheng Hall and went to concubine Han's bedroom as soon as possible, and found that she had woken up. "Ian, when did you wake up? Do you feel uncomfortable?" While talking, Xiao Jinyu came to the bedside and sat down, looking at her worriedly. Concubine Han had just woken up. She didn't see Xiao Jinyu and planned to sleep for a while, but she saw him coming back. "I just woke up, I feel a little dizzy, I want to eat." Her voice was still very weak. "I'll have someone bring the food," Xiao Jinyu said and told Ping Er to prepare the food. Ping Er had prepared the food early in the morning, just waiting for concubine Han to wake up and eat it. It would be ready to eat after heating it up. When the food was brought, Xiao Jinyu wanted to feed her, but was rejected for feeding too much trouble, so he had to give up. Concubine Han felt better after eating. Xiao Jinyu wiped the corners of her mouth with a wet handkerchief. His movements were gentle and delicate, for fear of hurting her. "Do you want to go out and bask in the sun?" Concubine Han nodded. "I haven't basked in the sun for a few days." Xiao Jinyu asked someone to move the rattan chair to the yard and spread a thick mink blanket. When he was sure it was soft and not painful, he picked up a yan and put him on it. The sunshine in the yard was warm and gentle, shining lazily on the body, very warm. Concubine Han closed her eyes and enjoyed the sun bath. Xiao Jinyu stayed with her all the time. In the dead of night, Xiao Jinyu suddenly woke up from his sleep with surprise, opened his eyes, and looked at the person in his arms with the faint light of the bedside, and saw that her eyes were closed tightly, without any movement. He supported himself with his elbows, stretched out his hand to feel concubine Han's breath, and when he was sure that she was still breathing, he breathed a sigh of relief. Xiao Jinyu lay down and closed his eyes to continue sleeping, and found that the person in his arms moved a little. He opened his eyes and saw a Yan looking at him. "What's wrong? Did I wake you up?" "No, I woke up by myself." Concubine Han woke up a little earlier than Xiao Jinyu, but she didn't open her eyes until she noticed Xiao Jinyu's action of feeling her breath. In fact, Xiao Jinyu has done this many times. Since Concubine Han became seriously ill, he would wake up from his dream every night, and then check her breath to make sure she was still breathing before he could rest assured. "Can't sleep now?" Xiao Jinyu asked. Concubine Han nodded. "I slept too much during the day, so I'm not very sleepy now." "Then I'll chat with you for a while, how about that?" "Okay." "Ian, it's all my fault. I didn't bring you with me because I was afraid you would suffer. As a result, it gave others the opportunity to harm you. If I had known earlier, I would have brought you with me wherever I went. If she has the intention to harm others, it's useless to bring her with you. Let this matter pass, and you are not allowed to blame yourself anymore." What he heard most these days was Xiao Jinyu's self-blame. It was obviously not his fault, but he always felt that the fault was his. Xiao Jinyu hugged her body tightly and buried his face in her neck. "I won't say anything when you get better." Concubine Han looked down at the furry head in her arms, reached out and held his face. It had been a while since she came back, and his skin color had returned to white. After staring at the beautiful peach blossom eyes for a long time, she leaned over and kissed his lips. Xiao Jinyu was stunned for a moment. He had not thought about these things during the days when Ian was sick. He had no intention to think about them. Now that he was kissed, he immediately had those thoughts. He responded gently, but did not dare to go further. After kissing for a while, Xiao Jinyu pushed her away and said in a hoarse voice, "You are still sick, bear with it, and continue when you get better." Concubine Han just wanted to comfort the overly frightened Xiao Jinyu, but he misunderstood her. "Yeah." Xiao Jinyu stared at her for a while, leaned over to her ear and said, "Ian, when you get better, let's make a baby." Concubine Han was silent for a while and nodded. Xiao Jinyu was so happy. "Our baby must be as cute as Susu Dao Tao." Concubine Han did not comment. Xiao Jinyu gradually lost her sleepiness. Concubine Han suddenly opened her eyes and asked, "Why did you touch my nose just now?" Xiao Jinyu subconsciously replied, "See if you are breathing." Concubine Han. Asterisk. Feng Wei gave Wang Jingyuan acupuncture twice in the past few days, trying to improve his condition. But the effect was not great. Wang Jingyuan was already very weak. "Xiaoju, I will go back in 2 days." "So soon? Won't you stay a few more days?" People like Wang Jingyuan are not suitable for long-distance travel and fatigue. So Feng Wei was a little worried. "I have lived here for some time." Wang Jingyuan was actually reluctant to go back, but he couldn't keep disturbing her. Feng Wei thought for a while and said, "Brother Awan, wait a little longer, wait for me to make another prescription, then you can go, okay?" She was afraid that after this separation, she would not have the chance to see each other in the future. This was in ancient times. In addition to horses and carriages, communication also relied on letters. If something happened, there was no time to notify. How could Wang Jingyuan refuse Xiaoju? Besides, he was reluctant to do so. "Okay." Feng Wei flipped through the medical books to find the prescription. Wang Leiwen had been looking for an opportunity to get close to Xiao Jinyan, but she found that Xiao Jinyan was really busy, either discussing matters in the meeting room or reviewing memorials in the imperial study. Since the emperor fell ill, he began to delegate power. He saw the ability of the prince, who was the strongest among all the princes. In fact, as early as Xiao Jinyan was born, the emperor wanted to make him the prince, but he didn't take action because he was still very young at that time. Later, Yu was born, and he wanted to see which of the two brothers was more suitable to be the emperor. When Yu grew up a little, he found that Yu's temperament was not suitable for being an emperor, and the prince could only be Yan. It was just that the situation was unstable at the time, and Daxia was not the strongest country. Nanzhao Kingdom designated the prince born by the queen as a hostage. At that time, Yu was young, so he decided to send Yan to Nanzhao Kingdom as a hostage. Yan left for 8 years, and his personality changed drastically when he came back. He decided not to appoint a crown prince for the time being, and he did not express his opinion. He saw the brothers fight, and he also found that Yan had grown a lot. He acted calmly and capable, and was decisive in killing. He seemed to see himself when he was young. The position of the crown prince, from beginning to end, was Yan. Xiao Jinyan didn't know all this. He thought that his father and mother were afraid that he would take his brother's position as the crown prince. The reason why they thought so was that they spoiled his brother too much, and his brother had everything he wanted. When he learned that he was going to Nanzhao as a hostage, he knew that his father and mother had given up on him. When he first arrived in Nanzhao, he was unfamiliar with the place, and he missed his father and mother very much at night, and wanted them to pick him up. But day after day, year after year, he didn't see his father and mother come to pick him up. After a long time, he didn't think about it. He thought that his father and mother must have forgotten him. When he was in Nanzhao, a little girl often came to see him, and the little girl always smelled faintly of candy. That was the only person in Nanzhao who always smiled at him. Even after many years, Xiao Jinyan still remembered the little girl's smile, which was very sweet. At night, when he was sleeping, she would secretly come to his room to deliver food. When he found out, she would pretend to be sleepwalking and run out. Her pockets were like a treasure chest, with countless food and toys. "Brother Jinyan, this is for you." It was a natural jade stone, priceless. This was also what he knew recently. She used the broken moon to draw on it. Xiao Jinyan woke up from a nap and found that he dreamed about his childhood, dreaming about Xiaju. When he returned to the East Palace, he came to the Hehuan Palace as soon as possible. When he opened the curtain and came in, he saw Xiaju on the couch, holding a medical book in her hand. Normally, she would still be taking a nap at this time. He walked over. "Xiaju." Feng Wei was so absorbed in watching that she was not there when Xiao Jinyan came in. She looked up in surprise. "Didn't His Highness say that he would be very busy today? Why did you come back?" Xiao Jinyan looked at her steadily. "I came back to see you." Feng Wei was a little confused. "Don't we meet every day?" She wanted to say that Xiao Jinyan was not a clingy person. "So what if we meet every day? I'll see you when I want to, only after seeing you will I feel at ease." Feng Wei blinked her beautiful eyes twice. "Your Highness is right." Xiao Jinyan did not stay for long before he went to work. Feng Wei spent 3 days to develop a new formula. With Lingquan water, it can prolong life. 1 more year is 1 more year. Maybe she can find a better way in the future. Wang Leiwen started to throw a tantrum when she learned that she had to go back. "Brother, why can't you stay a few more days? I haven't had enough fun yet." Wang Jingyuan knew his sister's thoughts and said in a harsh tone, "You have lived here for half a month. How long do you want to stay?" Wang Leiwen was a little dissatisfied and didn't say anything in the end. The day Wang Jingyuan left was sunny and windy. Wang Jingyuan said gently, "I came in a hurry this time. I will bring you delicious food next time." Feng Wei nodded. "Then I will wait for Brother Yuan to bring me delicious food in Daxia." Wang Jingyuan seemed to think of something. Didn't Yesuhan come to Daxia? Why didn't I see him? Feng Guiu said, third brother did come, but I haven't seen him for a long time. He didn't say a word when he left. Wang Jingyuan was a little confused. This is like his temperament. If he leaves, he won't fail to tell you. Feng Guiu also knew that the third brother would not be like this, but he felt something was wrong. What was wrong, she couldn't tell. Wang Jingyuan knew that Xiaju was worried about Yesuhan, so he comforted him. Xiaju, don't worry, Yesuhan may have something to do, or he may have gone to his master. Feng Guiu was a little confused. Why did the third brother go to find his father? Wang Jingyuan stared at Xiaoju for a while, then turned around and got on the carriage. Wang Leiwen reluctantly got on the carriage. As soon as he got on the carriage, he couldn't help complaining, brother, you like her, why don't you snatch her away? I like Xiao Jinyan, isn't it just right? As long as brother poisons them, no matter how in love they can still be separated. Wang Jingyuan's face darkened. Xiaju and Xiao Jinyan are husband and wife, and they are in love. You can use the poison to separate them, but you can think of it. Don't say she is my sister when you go out. I am embarrassed. Wang Leiwen turned her head angrily and ignored him. Lu Zaiyan would come to the East Palace to hang out when he had nothing to do. In fact, he wanted to find Wei Qi to explain the misunderstanding. It's just that I didn't see Wei Qi after I came a few times. Instead, Xiao Jinyan arranged errands. He discovered that Wei Qi was avoiding him on purpose. Lu Zaiyan couldn't help but wonder, that night, he talked nonsense while drunk. Did you scare Wei Qi? Qin Xiao came to Wei Qi and asked, Master Lu has come to see you several times, why are you avoiding him? Wei Qi looked at Lu Zaiyan who had walked away and replied, you don't understand. I don't understand what's going on in your mind, so just keep hiding. After Qin Xiao finished speaking, he left, but was stopped by Wei Qi, where are you going? Looking for my wife, she said she made soup for me today. After Qin Xiao finished speaking, he left without looking back. The unexpected dog food filled Wei Kai's mouth and face. Isn't it because I have a wife? Concubine Han has been recovering well for a few days and can get out of bed and move around. Xiao Jinyu was always worried and always reminded her to slow down. I'm already fine. Xiao Jinyu nodded, you should also pay attention to that. Concubine Han. The queen also learned about Concubine Han's illness and brought supplements to visit her. She saw two people in the yard. The queen has arrived. As the eunuch shouted, Xiao Jinyu and Concubine Han took a few steps forward to greet her, wish your mother a happy life. The queen said warmly, get up. Xiao Jinyu helped Concubine Han stand up. The queen looked at Concubine Han for a few times and saw that her complexion was not very good and she had lost a lot of weight. This is specially selected by me. You have just recovered from a serious illness, so you must take good care of it. Concubine Han was blessed and said, thank you, Queen, for your grace. The queen looked at her frail appearance and said, don't stand, sit down and talk. Xiao Jinyu helped her to sit on the chair. The queen sat down on the couch, looked at her son, and said with a smile, your birthday is coming soon, what gift do you want? Of course Xiao Jinyu had the gift he wanted, but he had something important to ask. Mother, don't you remember the birthday of the prince's brother? Good night Spicy. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 636. Suddenly mentioning the prince's birthday, the queen's face became a little unnatural. Why do you suddenly bring up this matter? Xiao Jinyu said, Mother, the prince has been back for so many years, but he hasn't celebrated his birthday once. Don't you want to celebrate his birthday? The queen's expression was a little unnatural. She really didn't celebrate the prince's birthday in these years. It's not that she didn't want to, but... Xiao Jinyu asked again, "Mother, why did you send the prince to Nanzhao as a hostage?" When Xiao Jinyu was a child, he was always curious about why the prince wanted to leave the palace. When he asked his mother, she didn't tell him, and his father didn't tell him either. The queen explained, "It's a situation that forces us to do nothing." Xiao Jinyu asked, "Why not send another prince as a hostage?" The queen sighed and said, "Do you think you can send whoever you want? The emperor of Nanzhao requires that it must be my child. If another prince is sent, it will be a big deal if he is discovered." Xiao Jinyu was stunned for a long time after hearing this. After a long time, he reacted, "So, it's not necessary to send the prince brother to Nanzhao. I can also be sent there. But my father and mother decided to send the prince brother as a hostage." The queen said, "You were too young at that time, and you didn't have any scheming at all. Who would be willing to send you there? Although the prince is also young, he is 3 years older than you and knows more than you. Only he can go. But the prince brother is only 8 years old. He was bullied in a strange place, and no one protected him." Xiao Jinyu suddenly thought of when he was 8 years old. He was protected by his father and mother, and no one dared to bully him, but there were still people behind him. The queen was stunned when she heard this. She knew it, and there was nothing she could do about it. "Mother, let's celebrate the prince's birthday this time. Just prepare a birthday gift for me." Xiao Jinyu said that it was best not to forget the birthday gift. The queen pursed her lips. The prince kept everything to himself. She really didn't know how to communicate with him like this. "What birthday gift does you want?" Xiao Jinyu looked at concubine Han beside him, reached out and held her hand, and this time looked at the queen. "The birthday gift I want is to make a Yan my main wife." Concubine Han raised her head and looked at Xiao Jinyu. She didn't expect that he was still thinking about this. In fact, the main wife or concubine is not important. What is important is his attitude. The queen didn't expect her son's birthday gift to be this. Every year, she would ask her son what he wanted for his birthday gift, and she would satisfy him as long as she could do it. She looked at concubine Han. Except for her status, there was nothing wrong with the rest. "My mother promised you, as long as you like it." Xiao Jinyu was so happy, "Thank you, my mother." Concubine Han bowed, "Thank you, queen." The queen didn't ask much of her youngest son, as long as he was happy. Coming out of Jiancheng Hall, the queen was a little worried. Qingying saw the queen's worry. "Queen, if you don't know how to prepare, why not call the crown princess to discuss it together?" The queen's eyes lit up when she heard it. "How could I forget the crown princess? Go and call the crown princess." "Yes." Qingying smiled and went to the East Palace. Feng Guiu was studying the prescription. When Qingying came, she saw the crown princess reading a book seriously. Feng Guiu saw Qingying and asked curiously, "How come Qingying madam has time to come here?" Qingying stepped forward to greet, "Crown princess, the queen wants the crown princess to go over for something." Okay. Feng Guiu put down the medical book and followed Qingying to Fenji Palace. After entering the main hall, Feng Guiu stepped forward to greet, "Mother, is there anything you want me to do?" The queen waved at her, "Crown princess, come and sit down to talk." "Yes, mother." Feng Guiu came to the queen and sat down, raised her head, waiting for the queen to speak. The queen thought for a while and said, "Crown princess, the prince's birthday is coming soon. I haven't celebrated his birthday for many years, and I don't know what he likes. What do you think is better to prepare?" Feng Guiu was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect that the queen called her here specifically to celebrate Xiao Jinyu's birthday. She has been in the palace for so many years, and Queen Ning has never celebrated Xiao Jinyu's birthday. In the past few years, she has prepared a bowl of longevity noodles and some small gifts for his birthday. Why did Queen Ning suddenly remember to celebrate Xiao Jinyu's birthday? "Mother, why didn't you celebrate His Highness' birthday before?" she couldn't help asking. The queen sighed. "The prince has been a hostage in Nanzao for so many years. After returning, his personality has changed drastically. I don't know how to get along with him. I always feel that he resents me. To be honest, I am also worried that he will even attack his own brother for the position of the prince." When he came back from Nanzao, his eyes were very strange, cold, as if he was looking at a stranger. Feng Wu felt sorry for Xiao Jinyan, who was suspected by his mother like this, even though he was the one who was wronged all these years. "Mother, His Highness is also your son. How can you doubt even your own son? His Highness has never regarded Prince Yu as an opponent. It is Prince Yu who has no feelings for the position of the prince." The queen said, "I know that Yu has no feelings for the position of the prince. After these years, I have also seen that the prince and Yu have a very good relationship. However, the gap between me and the prince is not so easy to resolve, and I owe him." Feng Wu said, "Mother, His Highness was often bullied by other princes in Nanzao. He always stayed in a corner alone and didn't speak. When I first saw him, I thought he was dumb. I think His Highness must have been thinking about his family at that time." After hearing this, the queen felt as if her heart was stabbed by a needle, and it hurt. The prince was her and the emperor's second child. The first child was a miscarriage, so when he was born, she and the emperor were very happy. No one doesn't love their own children. She still remembers the prince's eyes when he was sent away, so much so that she still dares not look him in the eye. Only incompetent parents will let their children be bullied outside. Feng Wu did not continue to say that Xiao Jinyan had been with her during his time in a foreign country. "Mother, it's His Highness's birthday, please cook him a bowl of longevity noodles." The queen was a little skeptical. "A bowl of longevity noodles is too casual, don't you need to prepare anything else?" Feng Wu said, "Mother, His Highness has always asked for little, and a bowl of longevity noodles cooked by in person can make him happy for a long time." The queen was stunned for a long time after hearing this, so much so that after Feng Wu left, she was still immersed in that sentence. When Xiao Jinyan came, Xiao Jinyan was busy. "Brother Crown Prince, it's almost time for lunch, why are you still busy?" Xiao Jinyan came to the desk. "I'll go to lunch after I finish these." "What's the matter with you?" Xiao Jinyan asked without raising his head. Xiao Jinyan chuckled twice. "My mother has promised me to let concubine Han be my principal wife. From now on, I will have only one wife like my brother Crown Prince." Xiao Jinyan said, "Congratulations, you got what you wanted." Xiao Jinyan said, "I plan to move out with Ayan. There are too many rules in the palace, and it's more free outside." Xiao Jinyan looked up at his brother, sighing that time passed so quickly, and his brother had already reached the age of 20. Speaking of which, this year is the age of 20, so it's good to move out and live. You're already an adult. Xiao Jinyu stared at the prince for a long time and called out, "Brother Prince." Xiao Jinyan asked, "What's wrong?" Xiao Jinyu said very emotionally, "Because of Brother Prince, I can live without worries for 20 years. If it weren't for Brother Prince, I would have too many responsibilities to bear, and I wouldn't be so carefree." Xiao Jinyan looked at his brother in confusion. "What's wrong today? Why are you suddenly saying these things?" Xiao Jinyan continued to be emotional. "I'm very fortunate to have Brother Prince. Brother Prince is my idol, and no one else can replace Brother Prince." Xiao Jinyan. "Brother Prince, you'll be busy later. It's lunchtime. Let's go to Hehuan Hall for lunch. Ayan has recovered well. I haven't eaten the meals in Hehuan Hall for a long time. I miss it," Xiao Jinyu said with a smile. Xiao Jinyan, after saying so much, it turns out that he wanted to eat for free. At night, during rest time, Feng Wu took the initiative to hug Xiao Jinyan's neck, which made Xiao Jinyan a little flattered. These days, Xiaoju didn't let him touch her. Xiaoju, are you happy today? Yes, I am very happy. Feng Guiu simply sat on him, and looked at the man in front of her with the night pearl on her head. She suddenly thought of Xiao Jinyan when he was 8 years old, who was cute and cold, and she remembered his silent appearance for a long time. Xiao Jinyan saw that she was just staring at him and smiling without saying anything, so he pinched her little face. What are you laughing at? Feng Guiu smiled and said, I think of your childhood, with a cold face, looking at me silently. Xiao Jinyan also laughed, I was afraid you were here to tease me too. Feng Guiu couldn't help laughing, I thought you didn't like playing with me. So, you secretly came to my bed at night to deliver food, and then pretended to sleepwalk. Pretend not to know the next day. In this way, you won't refuse, Feng Guiu said confidently. Xiao Jinyan hugged her into his arms, Xiaoju, I'm happy too. Feng Guiu yawned, it's getting late, you should go to bed early. As soon as Feng Guiu went down, Xiao Jinyan grabbed her into his arms, you are so happy today, shouldn't you celebrate? Feng Guiu became energetic, want to drink and have supper. Xiao Jinyan raised his lips, eat you. Feng Guiu, she should have known Xiao Jinyan's routine. On the birthday, Xiao Jinyan prepared a birthday gift for his brother and planned to give it to him at the birthday banquet in the evening. Every year, the Queen Mother would prepare a birthday banquet for her brother, so he knew it without asking. When it was time to light the lamp, Xiao Jinyan put down his official duties, told Lu 11 to take the birthday gift, and then returned to the Hehuan Hall. Xiao Jinyan strode in and saw Feng Guiu on the couch and said, Xiaoju, today is yours birthday, let's go to the birthday banquet. Okay, Feng Guiu likes banquets the most, except for Prince Yu's birthday banquet every year. Because every year when she accompanies Xiao Jinyu to attend, Xiao Jinyan will find an excuse to leave after sitting for less than 5 minutes. Now that her husband is gone, she, as a wife, must accompany him. Not only must she accompany him, but she must also prepare longevity noodles for him. She is also very happy to see him finish eating without leaving any soup. When the two came to the palace where the birthday was held in previous years, they found that it was so quiet inside that only the whistling wind outside could be heard. Feng Guiu looked at the empty palace, confused. Where is the birthday banquet? She tugged at Xiao Jinyan's sleeve and asked in confusion, Your Highness, what's going on? Xiao Jinyan didn't know either, did they change places? He ordered, Lu 11, go ask. Yes, Lu 11 responded and left quickly. When he came back, he was out of breath and said, Your Highness, I just inquired and learned that the Queen did not hold a birthday banquet for King Yu this year. How could it be? The Queen Mother holds a birthday banquet for King Yu every year. There is no reason not to hold it this year. Could it be that something happened? Xiao Jinyan thought for a while, then strode towards Qiancheng Hall. Feng Guiu followed slowly. When they arrived at Qiancheng Hall, before they even walked in, they heard conversations inside. Ian, today is my birthday, let's make a baby today, right? You eat first. Ian, are you scared? What am I afraid of? You're afraid of having children. Xiao Jinyan and Feng Guiu, who were standing at the door, looked at each other, nodded in agreement, then turned and walked out in unison. Before leaving, Xiao Jinyan ordered, Lu 11, give the birthday gift to King Yu and tell him that I have already arrived. Lu 11 responded, I know this. After Xiao Jinyan and Feng Guiu walked away, Lu 11 sighed. Prince Yu and Princess inside were just having fun with each other. How could he go in and disturb them? But if he doesn't go in now, he will probably have a baby after dinner later, and he can't disturb her. For the first time, Lu 11 thought, why is it so difficult to give a birthday gift? In the end, Lu 11 had no choice but to bite the bullet and let someone pass it on. When Xiao Jinyu saw Lu 11, he asked, where are the prince's brother and the prince's concubine? Llewellyn smiled and said, just after leaving, His Highness ordered his servants to give King Yu a birthday gift. Xiao Jinyu said with some regret, Brother Prince, why don't you come in and sit down for a while and have a drink before leaving? Llewellyn smiled and said, Your Highness doesn't want to disturb you and the princess. Let's make a baby together. After Llewellyn gave her birthday gift, she immediately rubbed oil on her solace and went for a walk, as she was afraid of disturbing Prince Yu and Princess. After Xiao Jinyan and Feng Wei returned to the East Palace, Xiao Jinyan went to the study. In the study, the lights are brightly lit. Xiao Jinyan sat in front of the desk and reviewed the memorial. In his heart, he had been waiting for Xiaju to cook longevity noodles for him. It has been like this for the past few years, and no one mentions it, but in the evening, longevity noodles will be brought out on time. At this moment, the study door opened from the outside. When Xiao Jinyan heard the movement, he knew it was Xiaju who was bringing longevity noodles. He sat calmly on the chair. After the door was pushed open, it was closed shortly after. As the footsteps got closer, the smell of egg noodle soup also wafted over. Xiao Jinyan didn't eat dinner, he was just waiting for the longevity noodles. Now that he could smell the fragrance, his hunger became more obvious. Good night, Spicy. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 637. The queen came in with the longevity noodles. She walked very slowly because she was too nervous. For so many years, she hadn't made longevity noodles for her eldest son. She didn't know if her eldest son would think it was too late when he saw her. If it wasn't for the crown princess to encourage her, she wouldn't have the courage to come in. Seeing Xiao Jinyan sitting in front of the desk, his serious look reminded her of the emperor when he was young. Speaking of which, the eldest son is a bit like the emperor, in his eyebrows and eyes, and his way of doing things. The only difference is that he handles emotions differently. In a flash, he came to the desk, and the queen put the longevity noodles on the desk. Xiao Jinyan glanced at the longevity noodles in front of him and found that they were a little different from those in previous years. He raised his head in confusion and was stunned when he saw the queen. Xiao Jinyan didn't expect to see his mother. He had never seen her on his birthday for so many years. Now he saw her, which made him a little at a loss. After he realized what was happening, he stood up and walked around the chair to greet the queen. Why is mother here? The queen glanced at the longevity noodles on the table. Today is your birthday, mother made longevity noodles, try it, do you like it? The queen was also spoiled since she was a child, and she didn't know how to cook. She learned to make longevity noodles for the emperor. After her eldest son was born, she would make longevity noodles for him on his birthday. She hasn't made it for her eldest son since he went to Nanzao. I don't know if he still likes it. Xiao Jinyan looked at the longevity noodles on the desk, and the bowl was still steaming, which should be fresh out of the pot. When he was in Nanzao, what he missed most was the longevity noodles made by his mother, but he couldn't eat it. He thought he could eat the longevity noodles made by his mother when he returned to Daxia. On his birthday, he waited all night, but he didn't get the longevity noodles made by his mother, and he didn't even have a simple blessing. Seeing that the Queen Mother celebrated his brother's birthday and cooked the longevity noodles he always wanted to eat, he really envied his brother at that moment. It also let him know that after leaving Daxia for these years, without the Queen Mother, he had long forgotten his birthday. He thought he would never be able to eat the longevity noodles made by his mother in this life, but he didn't expect to eat it today. Xiao Jinyan raised his head, looked at his mother, and opened his mouth to say something. How did the Queen Mother remember the birthday of her son? The Queen was a little uncomfortable, and she didn't dare to look at her eldest son. It was not because she was guilty, but because she felt guilty. She ignored her eldest son's feelings over the years, which made her feel that she was not a qualified mother. The Queen Mother always remembered your birthday. During the years when you went to Nanzao Kingdom, every time you had a birthday, the Queen Mother prepared longevity noodles for you. Xiao Jinyan was a little surprised. If he didn't know the Queen Mother's temper, he would think that the Queen Mother was lying to him. To ease the embarrassment, the Queen reminded, "Eat the noodles first, it won't taste good if it gets cold." Yes, Xiao Jinyan sat down on the chair and looked at the longevity noodles that were still steaming. There were 2 poached eggs on the noodles. He picked up the chopsticks, picked up the noodles and blew them to his mouth before putting them into his mouth to eat. It tasted the same as when he was a child. The Queen watched her eldest son finish a bowl of longevity noodles with her own eyes, and there was not even any noodle soup left. She suddenly felt like she was back to her son's childhood, cooking a small bowl of longevity noodles, and he finished it all. She didn't know what to say for a moment, picked up the empty bowl, and said softly, "The bowl, I'll take it away, you continue to review the memorials." Xiao Jinyan stood up and saluted, "Farewell, mother." The Queen walked out of the study with the empty bowl. Her heartbeat was always thumping, and she was so nervous that she didn't know what to say. Feng Wu had been waiting outside. When she saw the Queen coming out, she came forward and said, "Mother, how is it?" The Queen was a little excited. "He has eaten it all." I thought. She thought her son would definitely question why she treated him like this all these years, why she didn't celebrate his birthday, cook longevity noodles for him, why. She found that although her eldest son's temperament had changed a lot, it was only on the surface. He was still sensible and smart in his heart, and would think about others. Her son did not hate her as she imagined. On the contrary, in order to hide her guilt all these years, she was unwilling to communicate with her son. It was not that she was unwilling, but she didn't know how to communicate. How to make up for the motherly love that her son had missed all these years. Feng Wu didn't know the Queen's complex psychology, and she didn't understand it, because she had never experienced it, or it might be because of her personality. However, this was already a good start. Xiao Jinyan ate the longevity noodles cooked by the Queen herself. She proposed this because it was the first year when Xiao Jinyan came to Nanzao. That day, it was very cold, and Daddy put a red cotton coat on her. She chased the snowball out to play and saw a person squatting under the corner. Xiao Jinyan was taciturn at that time. No matter what she said or asked, he didn't say a word. He just stared at her with his beautiful phoenix eyes. Later, after getting familiar with him, she knew that it was his birthday that day and he wanted to eat the longevity noodles made by his mother. Unfortunately, she was still very young at that time and didn't know how to cook longevity noodles. After the Queen went back, Feng Wu took a look at the study before returning to the Hehuan Palace. In the dead of night, Feng Wu was sleepy when she saw Xiao Jinyan walking in with Yu Huang. "I'll take a bath first," Xiao Jinyan said, with a cold air on his body. Xiaju was afraid of the cold, so he didn't go directly to the bed. Feng Wu responded, holding the hot water bottle, waiting for Xiao Jinyan to take a bath and go to bed. When Xiao Jinyan came out of the shower, he saw Xiao Ju on the bed, with only his dark head exposed. He walked over with a smile, and under her gaze, he lifted the quilt and lay down. As soon as he lay down, Xiaju's petite body snuggled into his arms. "Your body is so warm." When winter comes, Xiaju loves to crawl into his arms and put her feet between his legs. Xiao Jinyan held her in his arms and looked at her with a half smile. "You know my mother will make longevity noodles for me today." Xiao Jinyan used affirmative sentences. Feng Wu raised her little face and said with a smile, "Are you happy then?" Xiao Jinyan did not hide his mood at the moment. "I'm happy. I haven't eaten it in 15 years, and it still tastes like when I was a kid." Feng Wu said, "My mother asked me a few days ago what should I prepare for your birthday. She also said that I would only prepare longevity noodles. Isn't that too casual? My mother is also very nervous." Xiao Jinyan said, "This is already good. Feng Wei put her arms around his neck and kissed him on the cheek. Jin Yan, happy birthday. Xiao Jinyan lowered his eyes and looked at her. Don't you have a birthday gift? Every year on his birthday, he still looks forward to the birthday gift Xiaju prepares for him. Of course Feng Wei turned around, took out a painting from behind and handed it to Xiao Jinyan. Here comes the birthday gift. Xiao Jinyan looked at the thing in her hand curiously and guessed it was a painting. He was even more curious about the content of the painting. Every painting she painted would amaze him and make him want to keep it privately. He couldn't wait to take the painting, and then slowly opened it, and the content of the painting gradually appeared in front of him. In the painting, there are two children, one big and one small. The boy was wearing black clothes and standing under the tree looking at the girl. The girl was wearing pink clothes, with two sideburns, and was holding a bunch of candied haws in her hand. When Xiao Jinyan saw this scene, he immediately remembered that it was his birthday when he was 9 years old. Xiaju gave him a bunch of candied haws on a stick. She said she didn't know how to cook longevity noodles, so she used candied haws on a stick instead. But at that time, in order to satisfy his desire to eat longevity noodles, Xiaju asked Yu Shanfang to make a bowl of longevity noodles. Xiaju is Princess Juyu, and what she wants is a matter of her words. Although the longevity noodles were not cooked by his mother, he was still very happy. Xiao Jinyan looked at Xiaju excitedly. I want to keep this painting in a good collection. Feng Wei smiled. It was just for you to collect. Asterisk. At this time, on the carriage, June Mocking followed Feng Qingjian for more than half a month. During this half-month, he also learned about her identity and the reasons she said that she could not get married and have children. She is a saint of the Ula tribe, and she is required to remain a virgin during her reign. Without Shao Gongsha, one cannot be a saint. If you have sex with a man while you are a saint, it will bring bad luck to the Ula people. June Mocking found it a bit funny. It was obviously superstition and they put shackles on the saint. If something happened, it would be blamed on the saint. Along the way, Feng Qingjian saw June Mocking's thoughtfulness, which was in great contrast to his appearance. During this period of time, June Mocking did not do anything excessive. However, I would hold her and occasionally kiss her at night when no one was around. Other than that, there was nothing excessive. June Mocking is still a very upright gentleman, and she is very sure about this. The Wula people are located in Chanjun Mountain and are an ancient ethnic group. The carriage stopped at the edge of a pavilion. Feng Qingjian pushed the carriage away and jumped out neatly. She looked at the familiar mountains and went out to play for a while. She felt the same as she had for a long time. Finally reached. June Mocking got off the carriage and came to her side. Looking at the mountains in front of her, he asked her, "Is it convenient for you to live in the mountains?" Feng Qingjian raised her lips and smiled. Then you don't know. Although the Ula people live in the mountains, it doesn't mean they are very poor. Some of the food they eat is grown by themselves, and some of it is bought at the market. Go to the market. There are many roads in the city, so you don't have to worry about food and drink. June Mocking thought they lived in a remote area. I see. Let's go, I'll take you to see my mother-in-law. Feng Qingjian led June Mocking towards the mountain. June Mocking followed leisurely. He knew too little about her before. After walking for about 2 miles, I saw a bamboo house. It was obvious at a glance that the bamboo house was old. Feng Qingjian pushed open the fence door and walked in. She saw a figure on a stool in the yard, hunched over, pulling vegetables. She called out, "Mother-in-law, I'm back." The old woman, who was called the mother-in-law, made some tugging movements, looked back, and was a little surprised to see Feng Qingjian. "Why are you back so early? Didn't you say you wanted to have more fun?" As soon as her mother-in-law finished speaking, she saw the man behind Feng Qingjian, and her expression changed. "Why did you bring a strange man back? Have you forgotten the rules of the clan?" Feng Qingjian looked at June mocking, stepped forward and took her mother-in-law's arm, saying, "Mother-in-law, I have something to ask you." The mother-in-law glanced at the man and asked with a cold face, "What's the matter?" Feng Qingjian didn't mince words, but asked straight to the point, "Mother-in-law, I went out once before, right? And the palace guard sand is gone. You added it later, right?" Upon hearing this, the mother-in-law immediately scolded her with a straight face, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Feng Qingjian continued, "Mother-in-law, I am no longer a saint. I have been doing my duty for so many years. Does mother-in-law still want to hide it from me?" The mother-in-law still had a cold face, "I don't know what you are talking about. You just went out for a while and came back talking nonsense. You brought a man with you. I think you were deceived by the man." June mocking took 2 steps forward and looked down at the white-haired mother-in-law. "Mother-in-law, Feng is my wife. We have a daughter who is 20 years old this year. 20 years ago, you should have taken Feng away, right?" The mother-in-law sneered, "What nonsense are you talking about? How old are you? You come to deceive a Yan." June mocking replied slowly, "I am 42 this year. I was 21 when I met Feng Er." The mother-in-law showed an unbelievable look and looked at Feng Qingjian, as if to verify, "A Yan, is he really 42? Feng Qingjian nodded, "Mother-in-law, he is indeed 42, and has a daughter who is 20 years old. I saw it with my own eyes." The mother-in-law looked June mocking up and down, "Then who are you?" June mocking said, "I am the Suanman Master." The Suanman Master is another identity of June mocking. Compared with the identity of the National Master, almost few people know it. In the eyes of the world, the Suanman Master and the National Master are two people, both of whom are very powerful and mysterious. Feng Qingjian was stunned when she heard this. She had never asked June mocking about his identity during the days she met him. She only knew that he was a very powerful person. She didn't expect that he was actually the Suanman Master. He has always been a mysterious figure in the legend, and she met the real person? The mother-in-law was also shocked for a long time. The Suanman Master is so young. June mocking, "Grandma, you are too kind." Feng Qingjian. "Grandma." At the table, the mother-in-law brewed a pot of tea and poured one for each of them. The teacup is made of bamboo, and the surface has been polished and is very smooth. Feng Qingjian took the teacup and continued to ask, "Grandma, did I really give birth to a child? Is the toad sand on my arm fake?" The mother-in-law sighed. The secret that had been buried in her heart for so many years was still discovered by Feng Qingjian. I didn't expect Feng Qingjian to meet the man before when she went out. In fact, the mother-in-law had never seen that man. Back then, Feng Qingjian was only 15 years old when she was chosen as the successor of the saint. She suddenly disappeared when she was 16. The succession ceremony of the saint was imminent, and there was no room for delay. When Feng Qingjian was found, she had already given birth to a child. It was a big deal for the successor of the saint to have a child, and she would be locked up in the Snake Mountain to feed the snakes. Moreover, the saints were selected through layers of selection a year in advance, and it was too late to make a temporary selection. Even if Feng Qingjian was not taken back, if she was found by other people in the tribe, she would probably end up being fed to the snakes. At that time, the mother-in-law took Feng Qingjian back to Chanjun Mountain regardless of her wishes. In order to prevent the elders of the tribe from discovering that Feng Qingjian had given birth to a child, she had to have the chastity sand repointed. Good night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 638. If Feng Qingjian had not abdicated, she would not have told this secret even if she died of old age. Although she expected that June Mocking's words were true, she was still shocked for a long time when she heard her mother-in-law say it herself. She, a saint, not only lost her virginity, but also had a child. If the people in the clan knew about it, they would probably go crazy. The mother-in-law instructed, although you are not a saint now, this matter cannot be known to the people in the clan, understand? Feng Qingjian also knew the seriousness of the matter and nodded vigorously, Grandma, I understand. June Mocking asked, Grandma, is there any way to restore Feng's memory? The mother-in-law said, at the beginning, a very ancient method was used to delete her memory, but restoring her memory is not troublesome, but it is not simple. June Mocking said again, then I'll trouble you, Grandma. Feng Qingjian raised her head and looked at June Mocking, and found that he spoke a little bluntly, but he had a handsome face. The mother-in-law glanced at June Mocking for a few times, and then at Feng Qingjian. The two faces clearly showed the difference between the two. Thinking that he was the master of Suanmen, different from ordinary people, she felt relieved. My mother-in-law said to get ready and went to rest in the house. Feng Qingjian sat on the stool, holding a teacup in her hand, still not recovered from the shock of learning the truth. June Mocking found that she had been silent, and asked in a gentle voice, what's wrong? Feng Qingjian looked up at June Mocking, and she was still very happy to think that such a young and handsome man was her husband. But I didn't expect what you said was true, and I didn't expect that I had a 20-year-old daughter. I haven't experienced the joy of being a mother, but I'm a grandmother. June Mocking sighed, it's quite regrettable. Feng Qingjian looked at him in confusion. June Mocking continued, 20 years of separation, how many 20 years are there in a person's life? 20 years have passed between us, and Xiaju has also missed 20 years of maternal love. Feng Qingjian was stunned when she asked, June Mocking was right, how many 20 years can there be in life? 20 years were wasted between them. June Mocking held her in his arms, we will be together from now on, we can't waste time anymore. Feng Qingjian was stunned again. Looking at the young June Mocking, she couldn't help but touch her face. If she had known that she could have such a young and handsome husband, she would have taken good care of this face. Maybe she could be younger, and the gap wouldn't be so big when she was with him. At night, when Feng Qingjian was about to rest, she saw June Mocking sitting there and not leaving. She asked, aren't you going to sleep? June Mocking put down the teacup in his hand, looked up at her, and glanced at the bed behind her, I want to sleep in the same bed with you tonight. Feng Qingjian directly refused, no. June Mocking asked, why? I haven't recovered my memory yet. Although I have confirmed that you are my husband, I have always slept alone. It will be a little uncomfortable to sleep on the same bed with a man suddenly. June Mocking was a little confused, what's wrong with this? It's been 20 years since we've been separated. Do you want one more day? Feng Qingjian. 20 years have passed, and this day doesn't matter. June Mocking was a little helpless, then I won't go to bed. Feng Qingjian said, it's not comfortable to sit all night. She didn't understand, how could sitting all night be more comfortable than lying in bed? He had to sit in the room and look at her. June Mocking said as a matter of course, you can let me go to bed. Feng Qingjian. Sure enough, I'm old, Feng Qingjian said and walked to the bed and began to take off her clothes. June Mocking stood up and walked over, sat down on the bed, and looked up at Feng Qingjian. It was as if Feng Qingjian had deliberately taken off her clothes in front of him. You said I'm old. Feng Qingjian paused while taking off her clothes and snorted, I'm just old. June Mocking said seriously, I'm normal in every aspect. If you don't believe me, you can check it out. Feng Qingjian looked at June Mocking doubtfully. Except for his handsome face, he was not young. How can I check this? I'm not a doctor. It's very simple. June Mocking looked at Feng Qingjian steadily, took her hand and put it on his chest. Feng Qingjian's hand was on his chest. Although he looked thin, his chest muscles were very strong. His robe was a spring style, very thin, and he could still feel his strong heartbeat. June Mocking continued, I can keep you bedridden for 3 days like before. Feng Qingjian was stunned for a moment, thinking about what he said, and then her face flushed. Who would have thought that he would be fine if he didn't speak, but once he spoke, he would be dirty. How did June Mocking say this? Seeing that she didn't say anything, June Mocking said again, why, don't you believe it? Feng Qingjian said coquettishly, who wants to believe this? June Mocking said, this is the best way to prove whether a person is old or not. Don't say it anymore. Feng Qingjian glared at June Mocking, took off her clothes, opened the quilt and lay down. The quilt was pulled very high, revealing only her head. June Mocking looked at her actions in confusion and asked, didn't you say I was old? Feng Qingjian couldn't help rolling her eyes, I didn't say you were old, you just didn't listen. June Mocking nodded helplessly, I understand. Feng Qingjian asked, what do you understand? June Mocking didn't say anything, but stood up and began to take off his clothes slowly. Feng Qingjian opened her eyes wide, watching the man in front of her take off his clothes without saying anything, and was a little confused. Why are you taking off your clothes? June Mocking glanced at Feng Qingjian while taking off his clothes. Sleep. Feng Qingjian. What kind of brain circuit is this? How did she fall in love with him back then? Is it just because of this face? Just when Feng Qingjian was confused, June Mocking had taken off his coat, lifted the quilt, and lay beside her. Feng Qingjian seemed to be frightened, and tried her best to move in. She was either shy or not used to it. After sleeping alone for so many years, who could get used to sleeping with a man suddenly? The two of them stared at each other. June Mocking spoke first, go to sleep, I was just joking just now. Feng Qingjian's mouth twitched, are you sure you were joking just now? June Mocking's face and tone, when he was joking, you thought it was true, and when you thought it was a joke, it was actually true, you can't tell. With a man lying next to her, how could Feng Qingjian sleep? Lying in the same quilt, she could feel the temperature of the other's body through the thin clothes. Winter should be cold, but now she felt warm in the quilt. The man beside her was motionless, and she didn't know if he was asleep. Feng Qingjian didn't know when she fell asleep. When she opened her eyes, June Mocking was no longer around her. She stretched, got up and started to get dressed. After getting dressed, she came out of the house. It was already noon outside. June Mocking was sitting in the yard, holding a teacup in his hand, drinking tea slowly. Where is the mother-in-law? She walked over with a brisk step and sat down in front of him. June Mocking picked up the teapot and poured her a cup of tea. The mother-in-law said she went to find medicinal herbs, which will help you recover your memory. Oh, the mother-in-law knows some medical skills. Feng Qingjian took the teacup to her lips and took a few sips to moisten her throat. June Mocking pushed the breakfast in front of Ming Tian. Feng Qingjian, this is what Qingrong prepared. You know what, I've been hungry for a long time. Feng Qingjian picked up the buns on the plate and took a bite. The cabbage and meat buns were delicious before. But after eating the breakfast made by Xiaju, I found that the taste was incomparable. June Mocking saw her eating the buns and asked, don't you like it? Feng Qingjian nodded, well, not as delicious as Xiaju's. That's natural. Xiaju is a good cook. When she was a child, she said that when she grew up, she would make delicious food for me. June Mocking recalled the scene at that time, I thought she was making me happy, but I didn't expect her to really do it. Feng Qingjian said, Xiaju is very sensible, you taught her very well. June Mocking didn't actually teach her anything. He spoiled his daughter and didn't let her suffer any grievances. Whatever she wanted, as long as he had it and as long as he could do it, he would satisfy her. So Xiaju didn't have a rebellious period and was happy throughout her childhood. She was also very courageous and would tell him everything. This is probably what it means to plant a willow tree by accident, and it will bring about a good harvest. A child who is educated with care may not be as good-minded and sensible as Xiaju. Feng Qingjian and Jun Mocking stayed here for 3 days, and they helped their mother-in-law recover her memory during these 3 days. Finally, on the 4th day, Feng Qingjian recovered her memory. The mother-in-law was old, and she would go to rest in the house after finishing her work. Feng Qingjian was lying on the bed, and she had not woken up because of the medication and the calming incense. Jun Mocking sat in front of the bed, lowered his eyes and looked at the sleeping woman, quietly waiting for her to wake up. Although Feng Qingjian was in a coma at this time, she was actually a little conscious, and was receiving the tide of memories that kept pouring into her mind. Too many memories made her a little unable to digest for a while, and her brows were furrowed, as if she was a little uncomfortable. I don't know what I thought of, tears flowed from the corners of my eyes. Jun Mocking saw it, took out a square handkerchief, and wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. At this moment, Feng Qingjian slowly opened her eyes and saw Jun Mocking, who was looking down at her. She was stunned at first, then called out, "Brother Cheng." Jun Mocking hadn't heard this name for a long time, and it felt like he was back to the summer of 21 years ago. "Are you feeling uncomfortable?" Feng Qingjian frowned and said, "My head hurts a little." Jun Mocking said, "I just recovered my memory, and my head will hurt a little. If it's uncomfortable, just sleep for a while." "No more sleep," Feng Qingjian said as she sat up from the bed, then threw herself into Jun Mocking's arms, and her voice suddenly became hoarse. "Brother Ching, it's been 20 years, and I've been separated from Brother Ching for so long. It's a pity." Jun Mocking patted his wife in his arms as if to comfort her. "I'm too incompetent. I looked in so many places, but I couldn't find you. How can you blame you? It should be my fault. If it weren't for me, how could we have been separated for so long?" Feng Qingjian stared at Jun Mocking's face carefully for a long time. Jun Mocking asked, "What's wrong?" Feng Qingjian touched the handsome face, which was smooth and delicate, not like the skin of a 42-year-old at all, and not much different from the skin of a 21-year-old. "You haven't changed much." Jun Mocking nodded, "Yes, you haven't changed much." Feng Qingjian didn't believe it, raised her eyebrows and looked at him. "Can you say it again with a clear conscience?" Jun Mocking heard it, raised his hand and touched his heart, and repeated it again very seriously, "You haven't changed much." "Feng Qingjian, when did you learn to be slick?" She remembered the first time she saw Jun Mocking. He was as cold as a fairy, he would not say anything against his will, and he would not be glib. Feng Qingjian suddenly opened her eyes. "You have become bad in the 20 years I have been away from you." Jun Mocking explained, "I haven't." Feng Qingjian raised her eyebrows. "Then why are you lying to me?" Jun Mocking said, "In my eyes, you are the same as before, no change." Feng Qingjian, "You still say no, I wouldn't say these sweet words before." She suddenly thought of Xiaju. When she left, Xiaju was only 2 months old, she couldn't recognize people, she couldn't call her mother, she only knew how to drink milk. "After I left, did Xiaju cry for her mother when she was a child?" Jun Mocking said, "Yes, she would ask me if she had a mother when she saw others had mothers." "She must have cried, right?" "She cried and looked for her mother everywhere, but it was a pity that I was not by her side." Feng Qingjian felt more and more distressed as she spoke, her eyes turned red, and there was a sign that tears were about to fall again. Jun Mocking, she didn't cry for her mother. Feng Qingjian's tears were already welling up in her eyes, and she held back her tears when she heard this. "She didn't cry for her mother. I told her to eat candy, and she stopped crying." Seeing that her face was not right, June mocking explained, Xiaju is only 3 years old, doesn't know anything, and is greedy. She will naturally stop crying if she has candy. Feng Qingjian felt that she had no weight in her daughter's eyes. When she left, she was only 2 months old. It was normal for her daughter not to cry because she didn't remember her. She stared at June mocking again for comfort. What about you? Did you cry when you found that I was gone? June mocking, I. Feng Qingjian thought he was embarrassed, cried. June mocking was silent for a while, and said something heartbreaking, I can't cry. Feng Qingjian, is her disappearance dispensable? She was a little angry, came out of June mocking's arms, and turned her head away from him. June mocking took her hand and explained, I have a problem with this. Feng Qingjian looked at June mocking again, her eyes full of confusion, what do you mean? I have never cried once since I was a child. June mocking had never told anyone that in modern times, his father died in a car accident and his mother cried like a tearful person. He was 7 years old that year and was also very sad, but he just couldn't cry. Others said that he was too cold-blooded. He was not sad when his father died, and he didn't even shed a tear. The year his mother died, he was 16 years old, and he didn't cry either. In that world, he no longer had any blood relatives and was alone. He was obviously very sad, but he still didn't shed a tear. At the age of 17, he learned that he had a problem with this. The year Feng Qingjian disappeared, he, who had always been calm, searched like crazy for 3 days and 3 nights. Looking at the dark night, his heart seemed to be missing a piece. Sad to this point, still no tears. Good night. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 639. This was the first time Feng Qingjian heard June mocking say that she had never cried before, and it was also the first time she heard that there were obstacles to crying. Then when you are sad, don't you have a place to vent? When she is sad, she expresses it by crying. Wouldn't it be more uncomfortable if I couldn't cry? June mocking just said lightly, would you like some water? It took a long time to recover her memory. Feng Qingjian might be a little thirsty now. She nodded, just warm water. June mocking stood up and came to the table, picked up the teapot, touched the teapot with her hand, and found that the temperature was not high, so she poured a cup of warm water and brought it to Feng Qingjian. Feng Qingjian took a cup of tea and drank some water to moisten her throat. She glanced at June mocking, her eyes couldn't help but linger on his handsome face. She was right before. She was attracted to this face in the first place and was fascinated by it. Looking at it now, she found that she was still attracted to this face. So young. June mocking asked, what are you looking at? Feng Qingjian said, I have a very good taste. June mocking, huh? Feng Qingjian said, in these years, you have not continued your marriage, nor have you taken any concubines. It is very common for a man to have 3 wives and 4 concubines. Countless people liked him at first. Even though they were married to her, they were still worried that one day he would be tempted by another woman. Unexpectedly, he didn't have those thoughts after she left for 20 years. June mocking replied with 3 words, I don't like it. Feng Qingjian. If there is someone you like, wouldn't you have that in mind? The thought of this possibility made her unhappy again. Feng Qingjian and June mocking did not stay here longer and left Changyanshan the next day. Feng Qingjian was raised by her mother-in-law. Now she was reluctant to leave. Before leaving, she held her hand and told her, if you don't feel happy staying outside, come back. Feng Qingjian was also a little reluctant to leave her mother-in-law, and her eyes suddenly turned red. Mother-in-law, you should also take care of yourself. I will come back to visit you often. The mother-in-law nodded when she heard this, okay, come back often. When leaving, Feng Qingjian looked back at her mother-in-law and felt really reluctant to see the place where she had lived for so many years. In the carriage, Feng Qingjian leaned in Jun Mocking's arms and said in a muffled voice, "Brother Qing, do you hate your mother-in-law?" Jun Mocking replied, "I don't even hate you." Feng Qingjian raised her head and looked at him, "What do you mean?" Jun Mocking thought for a while and said, "If it weren't for her, we wouldn't have been separated for 20 years. But she is your relative. As the patriarch, she has her responsibilities and has protected you." In fact, Jun Mocking still hates the person who caused their husband and wife to be separated for 20 years. 20 years, not 2 years. How many days and nights are missing? In the past 20 years, I might have had 2 or 3 children. He would not take his daughter into the palace because he was afraid that she would be too lonely. Maybe there will be no need to travel later. Sure enough, many things are a cycle of cause and effect. People in the world cannot get rid of it, and even he can't get rid of it. Feng Qingjian understood what he was thinking. "I understand." Jun Mocking said again, "You have been without me for 20 years, but I always wonder where you are. How are you doing?" Feng Qingjian hugged his neck distressedly and kissed Qin's face and then his lips as if to comfort him. Jun Mocking put his arms around her slender waist and said close to her ear, "Feng do you want to verify whether I am old?" Feng Qingjian blinked her beautiful big eyes twice. If it hadn't been for the night before yesterday, she wouldn't have known the meaning of the sentence. She glanced inside the carriage and said with a blush, "It's daytime and I'm still on the carriage." Jun Mocking glanced at the carriage, which was running along the official road at the moment. The sound of the wheels was drowned out by the sound of the carriage, which was a little bumpy. "You can try it." Feng Qingjian was a little embarrassed. "It's not good, is it?" Although she also coveted her husband's body, the location and time were not good, which made her too nervous. Jun Mocking did not answer, but showed with actions whether it was good or bad. Feng Qingjian used to think that Jun Mocking would have been single for the rest of her life if she hadn't taken the initiative. Unexpectedly, 20 years later, Jun Mocking's face would still be the same, but he had also learned to take the initiative. Later, she discovered that this man who didn't know how tired he was holding back. 20 years. It was getting dark and extremely cold. Shuihui stopped the carriage at the door of the inn. Feng Qingjian was carried into the inn by Jun Mocking. Qingrong looked at her master being held by Jun Mocking and thought, when did his master become so fragile? Shuihui drove the carriage to the backyard of the inn. After dinner, Feng Qingjian lay on the bed early to recuperate. Jun Mocking started to take off his clothes when he had nothing to do, getting ready to go to bed to rest. Feng Qingjian lay on the bed and watched Jun Mocking standing beside the bed taking off her clothes. This was not the first time she had seen him, so there was nothing to be embarrassed about. And in the afternoon, she specially touched his abdominal muscles. 20 years later, they were still as strong as before. Jun Mocking lay down on the bed and looked down at the woman who was staring at him unblinkingly. "What, can't sleep?" Feng Qingjian said, "It's still early, where can I sleep?" Jun Mocking nodded thoughtfully, then continue. "Feng Qingjian, you are really good." Jun Mocking said Feng Qingjian. "Okay." She moved further into the bed, then pulled up the quilt and wrapped herself tightly, fearing that she would be excited if seen by the man. What a joke, if she continues, how can she ride on horseback tomorrow? Jun Mocking looked at her actions with a bit of resentment in his eyes. At this time, in the capital of Daxia. After Tao Minor left the palace, her family was anxious to arrange a marriage for her. She met several men but none of them worked out, which made Tao's father very anxious. "Look at you, you are the one who wants to enter the palace, and you are the one who wants to leave the palace. Now I'm looking for a husband for you, but you are the one who doesn't want to. Minor, what are you thinking?" Tao's father felt that so many of his white hairs were anxious. Wang said earnestly, "Minor, don't blame your father for speaking rashly, you are not young anymore, and you are the mother of several children at your age. With a family background like our Tao family, there is no worry about getting married, but why don't you agree?" Tao Minor took a few sips of tea and said, "They are attracted by my family's money, I won't marry such a man." Tao's father thought it was something else, just this. Are they still worried that our family doesn't have money? If they don't like our money, would they be so active in proposing marriage? As long as we have it, they will like it, as long as you like this person. Tao Minor said earnestly, "Dad, you don't understand. You see, they are honest and talk nice now, but when they get money and get a shop, they will become bad, and then they will flirt with other women outside and bring a few concubines back. What do you want your daughter to do? Isn't it normal for a man to marry a concubine? Look at those men outside." After meeting Wang's eyes, Tao's voice weakened as he spoke, and then he didn't say anything. "Dad, you don't know that the crown prince can be the exclusive favorite, why ordinary men have nothing, spend my family's money, live in my house, and bring a concubine back to disgust me? I won't do it." Tao Minor grabbed melon seeds and cracked them. Tao Minor is like this now, not only because she has seen too many phoenix men in the storybooks, but also because she has witnessed the love between the crown prince and the crown princess, as well as the love between Su Qingqing and Jun Wuxian. She was too envious and looking forward to it. She would rather be alone than marry someone who is not good enough. Wang was so anxious that she almost cried, "Son, but you can't go on like this. If you delay it any longer, it will be even harder to get married when you are older." Tao's father couldn't help asking, "Don't you have anyone you like?" Tao Minor paused while cracking melon seeds, raised her head and glanced at her father and mother. "I like Song Tanhua, can you propose marriage?" Tao's father. Wang. "Daughter, isn't she just wanting to eat swan meat?" Tao Minor knew from her parents' reaction that she was daydreaming. She sighed, she was indeed daydreaming. How could Song Tanhua possibly like her? Tao's father and Wang were speechless, and Tao Minor was much calmer. She finished cracking melon seeds, clapped her hands and left the house. Outside, the cold wind was biting. After getting out of the sedan chair, Tao Minor gathered her fox fur. She remembered that Tanhua's house was nearby. After walking for a while, she saw the plaque of Tanhua's house. Just as she was hesitating whether to ask Ding Xiang to knock on the door, a carriage drove over here. The carriage stopped at the door of Tanhua's mansion, and then a man in a moon-white brocade robe came out of the carriage. Tao Minor recognized it as Song Tanhua at a glance. It was really a coincidence today. She mustered up the courage to come over and saw him coming back from the palace. She stood not far away, struggling whether to go up and say hello, but she didn't know what to say after meeting. She was the daughter of a merchant, and her hands were full of the smell of money. Song Tanhua was a scholar with rich knowledge and the tutor of the emperor's grandson. Song Tanhua got off the carriage and saw a person standing not far away from the corner of his eye. He subconsciously looked back and saw Tao Minor standing there. They haven't met since Tao Minor left the palace. After hesitating for a while, he walked over in the cold wind. The moment Tao Minor saw Song Tanhua coming over, she forgot to think and just stared at the thin figure without blinking. Although he was wearing a cotton coat, he was still a little thin. Song Tanhua walked to Tao Minor and stopped, asking in a gentle voice, "Miss Tao, why are you here?" Tao Minor blushed and said, I heard that Tanhua mansion is not far from my home, so I came to see if it is really not far away." Song Tanhua said, "It's a bit far." Tao Minor was silent for a while, thinking of the storybook she read, in which the heroine also took the initiative to ask the hero out. She pursed her lips, "When are you free? Let's go to Wuzixuan for tea together." Song Tanhua nodded, "Okay, rest tomorrow and come back early." Tao Minor thought Song Tanhua would refuse, but he agreed. After the excitement, She couldn't wait to say, "Then tomorrow, I'll wait for you in Wuzixuan." Song Tanhua replied, "Okay. Then I'll go back." When Tao Minor turned around, she was so excited that she almost danced with joy. It was already very good that she agreed to drink tea. Song Tanhua stood there, watching Tao Minor get into the sedan chair and be carried away by the sedan bearers. He smiled and turned to enter the Tanhua mansion. In the palace, Feng Guiu stayed at home for a while. Xiao Jinyan was getting busier and busier during this period. I heard that his father had the idea of abdicating. At the age of 50, it would be no problem for his father to be the emperor for a few more years. She didn't pay attention to the details. She sat on a chair and cracked melon seeds, watching the snowball jump down from the top of the wall. Suddenly, she wanted to walk outside the palace to see Su Qingqing and Tao Minor. At night, she resisted the urge to sleep and waited for Xiao Jinyan to come back. The first thing Xiao Jinyan did when he came back was to take a bath. She forced herself to wait for a while, and just when she was about to fall asleep, she felt someone lying down beside her, and when he leaned over, it felt like leaning against a big stove. She slowly opened her eyes and saw Xiao Jinyan's chest. He had just finished bathing, and there was a faint fragrance on his body, which smelled very comfortable. Jinyan. Xiao Jinyan was about to close his eyes, but when he heard a soft voice, he opened his eyes again and saw Xiaoju looking at him with her sleepy eyes. "Are you still asleep?" Feng Guiu leaned into his arms again. "Well, I have something to tell you." Xiao Jinyan asked, "What is it?" Feng Guiu said, "I want to go out of the palace to play with Su Qingqing and Tao Minor." Xiao Jinyan agreed very readily, "Okay, I'll give you a token, you can go out whenever you want, but..." Feng Guiu asked, "But what?" Xiao Jinyan said, "Bring more guards to ensure safety, and don't play around." Feng Guiu agreed very readily, "No problem, I promise not to play around." Xiao Jinyan asked, "Anything else?" "No." Feng Guiu kissed Xiao Jinyan again, "Good night." Xiao Jinyan couldn't help asking, "Good night, do you really mean that I like you?" Feng Guiu didn't expect that after so many years, Xiao Jinyan still remembered what she meant by saying good night back then. It's a little bit of a relationship, it can be a close greeting. Xiao Jinyan nodded, he misunderstood back then. Then the good night kiss is not what I mean by "I like to kiss you." The winter wind is like a knife. Feng Guiu likes to stay in bed in winter and doesn't get up until the sun is high. Chengzi has rested for a few days and now comes to serve Feng Guiu every day. Since Chengzi got married, she has become more and more charming, and her face always has a feminine demeanor, which was not the case before. Chengzi came over with a new fox fur coat. "Master, it's very cold today, put on a fox fur coat to keep warm when you go out." This fox fur coat was just made recently and was delivered by the Shanghai Bureau yesterday. Feng Guiu glanced at the fox fur coat in Chengzi's hand. It was bright red, with a circle of snow-white fox fur on the outside, which looked very beautiful. After putting on the fox fur coat with Chengzi's service, Feng Guiu's skin was white and tender, and she looked noble and beautiful in the bright red fox fur coat. Feng Guiu couldn't wait to leave the palace. "Let's go." With the support of Chengzi, Feng Guiu walked out of the Hehuan Palace. There was a luxurious carriage parked at the door, and the little rabbit had taken down the horse stool and was waiting. With the help of the two, Feng Guiu got on the carriage. The carriage was very spacious, with thick plush blankets inside, and it was very comfortable to lean on two soft pillows. Feng Guiu went out of the palace to play today, without bringing the two little guys. Because she had said hello in advance, Tao Minor went directly to Su Qingqing's place, which was the general's mansion. Good night. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 640. The princess arrived in person, and the general's wife came out with her family to greet her. General Su is not in the mansion. Feng Wei came to the general's mansion for the first time as the crown princess. With the support of Chun Xiang, she got out of the carriage and saw a lot of people standing at the door of the general's mansion. When Feng Wei walked in front of them, they all knelt down and saluted. "Welcome the crown princess." Feng Wei was stunned for a moment, then realized that this was the ancient etiquette. The crown princess has a distinguished status, and as a minister, she must perform courtesies. "Get up." "Thank you, princess." After the general's wife stood up, she stepped aside, and everyone in the mansion followed suit. Feng Wei glanced at the crowd and saw the figures of Su Qingqing and Tao Min'er with keen eyes. Now that they were in full view of everyone, it was hard to just walk over. With Chengxi's support, Feng Wei walked into the general's mansion, and then drove away the irrelevant people, leaving only Su Qingqing and Tao Min'er. Although Feng Wei knew that her ointment had miraculous effects, when she saw that Su Qingqing's face had returned to its previous state, there was no sign of disfigurement at all. "Qingqing, your face has healed." Su Qingqing was extremely happy. "Well, your ointment is still effective. It has been applied for more than a month, and it is almost better." Feng Wei asked, "Does my elder brother know?" Su Qingqing shook her head. "Axian and I haven't seen each other for a while. The wedding is coming soon, so it's best not to meet. We can still surprise him on the wedding night." Su Qingqing imagined the wedding night as she spoke. When Jun Wuxian saw the surprise on her face, he couldn't help but start to look forward to it. Feng Wei thought it made sense. "That's true. The wedding is coming soon, and I don't know if my father will be able to come back in time." Su Qingqing didn't know about the imperial master leaving Daxia, so she was a little surprised. "What did uncle do?" Feng Wei said, "I went back to my hometown with my mother. I should be back when the matter is resolved." As soon as these words came out, Su Qingqing and Tao Minor both showed surprised expressions and said in unison, "Has your father found your mother?" Feng Wei nodded happily. "Well, my father has been looking for it for 20 years and finally found it." Su Qingqing said with a smile, "Congratulations, I have the imperial master as my father, and now I have my mother. It's complete." Tao Minor smiled and said, "Who would have thought that the crown princess would have such a powerful father? Even the emperor probably wouldn't dare to say a word about it. The imperial preceptor is very powerful, and even the emperor dare not neglect him. The crown princess is the imperial preceptor's daughter. As the tide rises, the status will naturally be different." Su Qingqing said proudly, "The crown princess and I will become relatives immediately, upgraded to sister-in-law." Feng Wei immediately called out, "Hello, sister-in-law." Su Qingqing suddenly felt a little embarrassed when Feng Wei called her out like that. Tao Minor looked at the harmonious scene in front of her. When she first entered the palace, who would have thought that many years later, she and Su Qingqing would leave the palace to find their own happiness? "I never imagined that they would talk and laugh with this kind of relationship." Su Qingqing couldn't help but gossip, grabbed Tao Minor's hand and asked, "By the way, how are you and that Song Tanhua?" Feng Wei was also curious. Su Qingqing's love had blossomed and Tao Minor was the only one left. "Did you meet Song Tanhua after you left the palace?" Tao Minor looked at the two people in front of her. Before yesterday, she must have looked sad. However, yesterday she went to try her luck and met Song Tanhua, so her eyebrows were raised when she spoke. "Yesterday I went to Tanhua Mansion and met Song Tanhua. I also made an appointment with him to have tea this afternoon." Feng Wei smiled and said, "Song Tanhua didn't refuse, which means there's something going on." Su Qingqing said, "Why didn't you ask him out earlier? Maybe Song Tanhua has already come to propose marriage. My family has nothing but money. Song Tanhua is rich in education and talented. I don't know how much money the daughter-in-law wants to marry. I tried my luck yesterday." Tao Minor is still somewhat self-aware. Feng Wei consoled, "It doesn't matter. Sooner or later is not important. What matters is the ending. If the ending is good, it's good. Su Qingqing said, the crown princess is right. If Song Tanhua values family status so much, it means that he is also a very vain person, and it also means that he is not worthy of you. Tao Min'er felt a little comforted after hearing Su Qingqing's words. If Song Tanhua was such a person and didn't like her because of her family background, then she didn't like him either. Although it will be sad, the relationship she wants is not like this. Feng Guiu suggested, let's go out and play. In fact, she wanted to go out and buy some delicious food. She hadn't eaten the food on the street for a long time, and she was really hungry. Su Qingqing's eyes lit up. Okay, let's go out for a walk first, and then accompany Tao Min'er to meet Song Tanhua. Tao Min'er hesitated, is it too much? Su Qingqing said seriously, what's this? Song Tanhua is a scholar. My elder brother said that scholars are a bit pedantic and their behavior is a bit dull. I think Song Tanhua is like this. Let's stimulate Song Tanhua. If he treats you if it's intentional, isn't it better? If it's unintentional, the most important thing is to turn around and find someone else. Tao Min'er was still a little hesitant. Feng Guiu and the others left the general's mansion and walked straight to the bustling Chang'an Street. There are not many people on Chang'an Street in winter, and everyone wraps themselves up tightly. The vendors shouted hard despite the cold wind. Feng Guiu saw Mapei from a distance, pulled them and ran over. She pointed to the steaming meatloaf that had just come out of the pan and said to the boss, take 4 meatloaf. Okay, the boss neatly pulled out the dried lotus leaves, packed 4 portions and handed them to Feng Guiu. Chengzi took out the money bag from his pocket and paid 40 coins. Feng Guiu distributed the meat cakes to Su Qingqing, Tao Min'er, and Chengzi. Everyone took the meatloaf and continued shopping while eating. Chengzi followed behind with the hot meatloaf. She took a bite. It was very delicious. After 2 bites, she suddenly turned her head and looked behind her, and saw Qin Xiao following unhurriedly not far away. The crown princess came out today, and His Highness asked Qin Xiao to protect the crown princess's safety. Qin Xiao was on duty, so he couldn't disturb him to avoid being distracted. Qin Xiao noticed that Chengzi looked back at him. If he could not help but lean over him normally, it was just his duty now and he could not live up to his master's trust in him. Chengzi knew that Qin Xiao was looking at her. Her husband's handsome face on duty was much colder than in the boudoir. His stern smile made it difficult for others to tell that they were a couple. They have gotten along very well since they got married, and their workplaces are very close to each other. Although Qin Xiao sometimes stayed away from home due to official duties, she still felt very happy. Because Qin Xiao treated her really well. Chengzi looked away and continued to eat the meat pie happily. Feng Guiu finished the meat pie in her hand in a few mouthfuls. Passing by a pastry shop selling tea fruit, she couldn't help but walked in, pointed at the tea fruit inside, and waved her hand proudly, I want all of them. The store clerk was stunned for a few seconds and immediately started packing happily. Feng Guiu instructed, pack it into pieces, and pack everything together. I understand, ma'am. When the store clerk saw Feng Guiu twisting her hair, he knew that the beauty in front of him was married. He immediately understood the meaning of her words and packed the bags again. Su Qingqing couldn't help but ask, have you finished buying so much food? I brought some home. The 2 little ones must also like to eat them. Susu is so greedy that he can eat 3 in one sitting. The servants also eat some, and my mother also likes to eat these. The mother here refers to the queen. You cannot call her queen when you are away from home, you can only call her mother. Hearing what the princess said, Su Qingqing felt that these tea fruits could be eaten quickly. As a crown princess, if others treat her well, she will treat others well. The maids and slaves in the Hehuan palace serve them wholeheartedly, and the crown princess treats them well, so they are very loyal and difficult for others to bribe. Changzi paid the silver, but there were too many tea fruits for her to carry alone. Before she could say anything, Qin Xiao had already strode over and took away the tea fruits from Changzi's hand and on the counter with one hand. "Just give it all to me." Changzi raised his head and glanced at Qin Xiao. Although he was straightforward and a bit naive, he was also very careful sometimes. There were also scattered tea fruits, which Feng Wu and the others ate on the way. Each tea fruit was not very big, so Feng Wu finished all three in a short while, feeling a little unfinished. Passing by a pancake stall, a dessert stall, Feng Wu walked and ate all the way, and still wanted to eat when she saw the delicious food. Su Qingqing and Tao Min'er were different. Although they were also greedy, they were full after eating so much along the way. They didn't even eat the desserts. Feng Wu held 2 bunches of candied haws in her hand and bought a few bunches to take back for the 2 little guys to try. Feng Wu was eating candied haws in her mouth, her cheeks were bulging, and she couldn't speak clearly. "Is it time for your appointment with Song Tanhua?" Tao Min'er said, "There is still half an hour." Feng Wu nodded, "Then we can continue shopping and walk all the way to Wuzixuan." Su Qingqing and Tao Min'er looked at each other and admired Feng Wu for being so good at eating. By the time they reached Wuzixuan, it was only a quarter of an hour before their appointment with Song Tanhua. Feng Wu was also full and sat on the other side with Su Qingqing, keeping a certain distance from Tao Min'er. The 3 of them drank tea while waiting for Song Tanhua's arrival. Feng Wu drank 2 cups of tea and ran to the latrine 3 times, but did not see Song Tanhua arriving. "Qingqing, why hasn't Song Tanhua come yet?" "I'm going to ask." Su Qingqing came to Tao Min'er and asked doubtfully, "Min'er, why hasn't Song Tanhua come yet? Did you remember the time wrong?" Tao Min'er was also very confused. She and Song Tanhua made it clear yesterday that the time and place were correct. Probably not. Song Tanhua doesn't look like the kind of person who doesn't remember time. Song Tanhua doesn't look like someone who is unpunctual, but why hasn't he come yet? Su Qingqing looked at the window with confusion on her face. People were coming and going on the street, but Song Tanhua was not seen. She looked away again. Tao Min'er thought for a while and guessed, "Is it possible that Song Tanhua is delayed by something? Why don't we wait? It's possible that Song Tanhua is an official of the imperial court. Maybe something really delayed her. Let's wait." After Su Qingqing finished speaking, she returned to Feng Wu. "Maybe something has delayed us. Can we wait a little longer?" "Okay then." Feng Wu yawned. She had always taken a nap, and now it was her nap time, so she felt a little sleepy. After 2 cups of tea, Song Tanhua still didn't arrive. Tao Min'er was very patient at first. After an hour, she couldn't sit still. From time to time, she looked outside the tea house and only saw people coming and going on the road. Song Tanhua obviously promised to come. He said he was not busy after rest today and came back very early. Feng Wu and Su Qingqing also found that Tao Min'er was a little bit abnormal, and they all sat over. Su Qingqing said, "Song Tanhua hasn't come yet, maybe he was delayed by something, otherwise, let's ask him later." Tao Min'er looked up at Feng Wu and Su Qingqing, "Let's go back." Feng Wu asked, "Aren't you going to wait?" Tao Min'er said faintly, "I've been waiting for an hour and a half, I won't wait anymore." Feng Wu didn't persuade him anymore. "Okay, tomorrow Song Tanhua comes, I'll ask him why he doesn't come to Wuzixuan." Tao Min'er nodded sullenly, "Yeah." Originally came happily, but left with depression and unwillingness. Feng Wu didn't stay in the general's mansion for long, bought a lot of food, and returned to the East Palace. Feng Wu and Su Qingqing, who said goodbye to Tao Min'er, returned home a little lost. When Tao's father saw his daughter, he couldn't help but persuade her, "Song Tanhua is not an ordinary person. Our family has nothing but money. How can he be interested in us if we are not of good family background? Min'er, Why don't you lower your standards? Wang said gently, Minner has a good vision. She likes Song Tanhua at first sight, but we are not a good match for him. Tao Minner looked at her parents' gray hair and always worried about her marriage. It was rare that she didn't refute them, probably because she knew she couldn't be like Song Tanhua. I'll think about it again. Seeing his daughter relax, Tao's father knew there was a chance, then think about it. I'll arrange a blind date for you in 2 days. Tao Minner nodded and went back to her boudoir. Wang noticed that something was wrong with her daughter and looked at Tao's father. Didn't Minner go to see the crown princess? Why is she still unhappy? Tao's father thought for a while and said, maybe, she is envious of the crown princess. His Highness loves the crown princess alone, and it has long been a good story, making the women in the capital envious. Wang sighed, no wonder Minner has such high requirements. After Song Tanhua came out of the palace, he asked someone to drive the carriage directly to Wuzixuan. After the carriage stopped, Song Tanhua walked out of the carriage and walked straight in. At this moment, the sun was setting. Song Tanhua searched for Tao Minner in the private room on the second floor for a long time but didn't see her. He thought that since he was so late, Tao Minner must have gone back a long time ago. Today, he was suddenly called by His Highness, which delayed his return time. He retracted his gaze and walked downstairs with even steps. When he reached the door, he looked back, then retracted his gaze and got on the carriage. Feng Wei returned to the East Palace and divided the food as soon as possible, and sent one portion to Fenji Palace. Susu is playing with the big white tiger master beast. Feng Wei came over with a candied horse and waved to his daughter, Susu, look what I brought you. Susu looked up and saw the candied horse in Feng Wei's hand. Her beautiful big eyes sparkled. She couldn't wait to get off the tiger master beast and ran over with her short legs. Good night. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Iyun Si. Chapter 641. Mom Susu threw herself into Feng Wei's arms, holding the candied horse in her hand eagerly. Feng Wei looked at her daughter's slanderous appearance and reminded, be careful, don't get poked in the mouth by the bamboo stick. I know it's spicy. Susu opened her mouth and took a bite of the candied horse. It was sweet and a bit sour. She hadn't eaten candied horse in a few days, but now she was very happy to eat it. Feng Wei looked at her daughter's greedy appearance. It's not surprising that Xiao Jinyan said that her daughter was like her. She was like her. There was nothing wrong with being greedy, and happiness was the most important thing. While Susu was eating the candied horse, she didn't forget to ask, Mom, when will Grandpa and Grandpa come back? Feng Wei also discovered that her father and mother had left for a long time, and she didn't know that they had come back with MOAE. I don't know. When they come back after handling the matter, they might be able to catch up with your uncle's wedding banquet. When Susu heard the word banquet, her eyes lit up. She had had banquets several times. I just ate it once not long ago. Isn't there a lot of delicious food? Feng Wei couldn't help but smile when he heard this. His daughter was as virtuous as him, and she knew how to eat when she heard about a banquet. Well, there are lots and lots of delicious food. Susu said happily, Mama, please remember to take me there when the time comes. Feng Wei nodded, yes, I will definitely take you there. Susu happily held the candied horse, held Feng Wei's hand with one hand, and asked expectantly, Mom, what kind of meat will you eat tonight? Feng Wei saw that it was not dark yet, so her daughter was thinking about what meat to eat at night. Crystal elbow, braised pork ribs. Susu arched her eyebrows after hearing this, it's all a matter of love. Feng Wei smiled, it was also her favorite food. The weather was getting colder and colder, and the queen was too lazy to go out. She sat on the couch holding the heater and read for a while, feeling a little drowsy. Qingying opened the curtain and walked in. "Empress, the crown princess sent some food from outside the palace." The queen was dozing off, and she suddenly woke up a little when she heard that she was eating. When winter came, she became even more slanderous. "Really? Let her in quickly." Hereafter Qingying walked out. When she came in again, Chengzi followed behind her. Chengzi stepped forward and saluted, "May the queen be blessed with peace and happiness." The queen said, "Get up." "Thank you." Queen Chengzi stood up and gave several packages in his hand to Qingying. Qingying took several packages and placed them on the low table, opened them and placed them in front of the queen. As soon as the package was opened, the fragrance wafted out. The queen took a few glances, and the first thing she saw was the red candied haws. She hadn't eaten them for a long time. She picked up a bunch of candied haws and brought them to her mouth and took a bite. They were sour and sweet, just like the taste in her memory. She said with a satisfied look on her face, "The crown princess is still thinking about me. You go back and tell the crown princess that I like her very much." "My slave obeys your orders." "This slave will leave." Chengzi lowered his eyebrows and nodded, then slowly withdrew. After the queen finished eating a bunch of candied haws, she saw the tea fruit. Just by looking at it, she knew it was the one she often ate at. She picked up a piece of tea fruit, put it in her mouth and took a bite to taste the taste. It still tastes the same as before. Qingying has followed the queen for so many years, so she naturally understands the queen's preferences. These are the queen's favorite foods. The queen likes to eat, and the crown princess is also interested. The queen sighed a little. Yes, the crown princess is still interested. The crown prince has been busy recently, and Yuer has also moved out of the palace with the princess, so she doesn't know how to come into the palace to have a look. Qingying comforted her. "The princess is seriously ill this time and almost died." King Yu was frightened. Now that the princess is fragile, King Yu definitely wants to accompany her at all times. The queen felt a little better after hearing this. "It's true. If you don't love your daughter-in-law, who will?" Both sons know how to love their wives, and they are very dedicated. They probably inherited my genes. Not like an emperor at all. Qingying said, "The queen has always been devoted to the emperor and supported her wholeheartedly. The prince and Prince Yu have indeed followed the queen." The queen sighed. If the dog emperor could do this, he would have no regrets in this life. She ate 2 pieces of tea fruit in a row. The sweetness was just right, which also relieved her depression. At night, as soon as the queen finished bathing, the emperor came. The emperor was a little surprised when he saw that the queen had gone to bed. "Linger has rested so early." The queen said, "It's such a cold day, and there's nothing important to do. Why don't you sit there and get cold if you don't take a rest early?" After the emperor came in, Qingying took off his fox fur and hung it on the hanger, then took off his clothes. After taking off her coat, Qingying exited. The emperor sat down on the edge of the bed, lifted the quilt and sat in, with a soft pillow behind his back, and looked down at the queen. The queen raised her head and saw the emperor looking at her. She asked, "Isn't the emperor sleeping?" After the emperor pondered for a moment, he said, "I have something to tell you." The queen said. The emperor said, My concubine, listen." The emperor slowly said 4 words, "I want to abdicate." The queen thought she heard wrongly. What did the emperor say? The emperor repeated again, "I want to abdicate and let the prince succeed." The queen was stunned for a moment when she heard this. The abdication was a big deal. The emperor would definitely not joke about abdicating, so it was true. Throughout the ages, which emperor abdicated when he was in good health? The queen sat up and found that she was a little cold, so she wrapped herself in quilt again, and then asked, "Why is the emperor thinking of abdicating the throne at such a young age?" The emperor said quietly, "Being an emperor is too busy. The queen said, "Isn't this nonsense? Being an emperor must be busy. The emperor has been the emperor for decades, hasn't he realized this yet?" The emperor stared at the queen without blinking and sighed, "It is precisely because he has been the emperor for decades and is so busy that he has ignored you." The queen felt a little uncomfortable and said, "The emperor takes care of everything every day. I have never complained." The emperor nodded, "Well, you only complained a few times when you were the princess. At that time, I didn't have the awareness now, so I ignored you." The queen snorted, "How many years has passed since I was still the crown princess? Why does the emperor still mention it? Who doesn't have a bad temper when they are young?" The emperor smiled and said, "I know that at that time, you really loved to have a bad temper, and you always wanted to go back to your parents' home." Queen. Still mentioning it? The emperor sighed again, Time flies so fast, decades have passed like this." The queen snorted again, "Well, I don't need to remind you, your majesty. I know that I am old and lose my lust." She remembered that the dog emperor said that she had crow's feet at the corners of her eyes, that her skin was not as good as when she was a teenager, that her lip color was not as delicate as when she was a teenager. The emperor explained, "I don't think so. It's the aging of beauty, and it's also a process. It's precisely because of this process that we have witnessed that we are still together well after so many years." The queen touched her face and said with some dissatisfaction, "This is called being together well? Is the emperor probably forgetting the time when he hugged me?" When the emperor saw that the queen was angry, he stretched out his arms to hug her and comforted her in a gentle voice, "Don't mention those things again. If I hadn't been born into the emperor's family, I wouldn't be like this." The queen said, "Your Majesty, look at Yanner and Yor. They don't look like you at all. Emperor. Can things be the same now as before? Is the situation as stable in the past as it is now? What the emperor says is whatever it is, and I don't dare to speak nonsense." The queen yawned as she spoke, then lay down on the bed again, planning to sleep. When the emperor saw the queen lying down to sleep, he asked anxiously, "I haven't finished speaking, and you're already asleep?" The queen lazily said, then the emperor said, "I just listen." Seeing the queen's casual attitude, the emperor instantly lost the desire to say anything. He originally thought he could have a good conversation with the queen tonight. As a result, "I haven't even said a few words, and that's it?" The emperor sighed and lay down too. He saw that the queen had closed her eyes and had no desire to speak. "Forget it, let's talk about it in a few days." Early the next morning, Feng Wu came out of bed reluctantly, dressed and washed under Chengzi's care. Chengzi said, "Master, it's been cold these past 2 days, and it's probably going to snow. Please dress warmly, so as not to catch the cold." Feng Wu looked out the window and saw that the tree beside the window was swaying from side to side in the wind. She felt the coldness of the deep winter before she even went out. It's about dressing warmly. After finishing breakfast, Feng Wu hugged the heater and glanced next door. "Chengzi, is Song Tanhua here today?" "My slave, go over and ask." Chengzi trotted through the back door to the next door. After a while, Chengzi ran back again. "Master, Song Tanhua asked for leave. She said she felt cold." "What a coincidence. You didn't go to the appointment yesterday, and you asked for leave today because you caught the cold." Feng Wu's eyes were full of doubts, and she didn't know whether it was really the cold or an excuse. Chengzi reminded, "Master, go in first, it's windy outside." Feng Wu pressed the heater, waited for Chengzi to open the curtain, and walked in. Susu was wearing a bright red cotton coat made by the queen herself, with a ring of snow-white fox fur around the collar and cuffs. Holding the candied hose in hand, I walked towards the next door on my short legs. She had passed by it countless times on the way to the study, and soon arrived at the study. Song Tanhua didn't come to teach, So Chu Lingfeng took Dao Tao to read and practice calligraphy. Susu lay on the door frame and looked in. When she saw the pots and pots, she let go of the door frame and ran in happily. Pot pot, little pot pot. When Dao Tao saw her sister, she put down the pen in her hand and walked over. Susu, why are you here? I came here to play with the pot pots. Susu secretly took out the candied hose on her back and handed one bunch to Dao Tao. Dao Tao held the candied hose and turned to look at Chu Lingfeng. Prince Chu, why don't you take a day off today? Chu Lingfeng stood up and walked over. Well, it's up to you. Susu handed another bunch to Chu Lingfeng. Little pot, eat candied hose. Chu Lingfeng took the candied hose from her hand and said, thank you Susu. Susu said with a smile, let's go out and play. Dao Tao nodded, okay. Chu Lingfeng was originally a reading companion, and since Dao Tao said yes, he naturally couldn't refute. Asterisk. Tao Minor had been in the boudoir for most of the day. Wang came over and called the door several times, and finally the door opened. Wang looked at her daughter with a worried look on her face. Minor, what's wrong with you? Tao Minor shook her head. Mom, I'm fine, I just want to sleep. That's good. Ms. Wang breathed a sigh of relief. She almost thought her daughter couldn't think about it anymore. Then we went out for lunch and made your favorite braised lion head. Tao Minor nodded, okay. When we arrived at the dining table, the family sat at the table and had lunch. After Tao Minor took a few bites, she heard Tao's father say, I asked the matchmaker to tell me that the Chen family, a rice merchant, has a son who is not yet married. Minor, do you want to go and meet him? Tao Minor paused while eating. Things were bound to happen, and there was no way to avoid them. She looked up at her father. Dad, just arrange it. After hearing this, his father nodded happily. Okay, I'll have someone notify the matchmaker and let the matchmaker arrange it. Okay. Tao Minor lowered her head and continued to eat the food in the bowl. After lunch, his father couldn't wait to ask someone to find the matchmaker. The matchmaker was 45 years old and had been a matchmaker for decades. She was also very efficient. The time was scheduled for tomorrow morning, in the private room of Wu Zixuan. In the morning, Ding Xiang dressed up her daughter. Tao Minor stared at herself in the mirror absent-mindedly. In terms of appearance, she was not as good as the crown princess, and in terms of family background, she was not as good as Su Qingqing. Her family really had nothing except money. She was 20 years old and had become an old girl. She was indeed not worthy of Song Tanhua. The reason why Song Tanhua could talk to her was because he was a polite person. Ding Xiang had been with the young lady since she was a child, and it was no secret that she liked Song Tanhua. Miss, are you unhappy today? What's so happy or unhappy about it? Although the love in the storybook is good, it is not something that everyone can encounter. The Crown Princess and Qingqing did not have a smooth sailing either. They also experienced the current result. Ding Xiang advised, Miss, don't be sad. Maybe this Mr. Chen is also a good person. Tao Minor said, who knows what he is like. Let's go and meet him first. After everything was ready, Tao Minor took a sedan chair to Wu Zixuan. It was morning at this time, and there were not many people in the tea house. Tao Minor walked into Wu Zixuan accompanied by Ding Xiang, and came to the agreed private room, and saw that the matchmaker was already waiting there. There was also a man sitting next to the matchmaker. The man was wearing a navy blue brocade robe, with a handsome face. He looked about 23 years old, which was about the same as the matchmaker said. Ms. Tao, come, sit down first, the matchmaker greeted warmly. Tao Minor nodded and walked slowly to the table and sat down. The matchmaker had already explained the details of the two families and their ages. Ms. Tao, this is Mr. Chen. Tao Minor greeted politely, hello, Mr. Chen. Ms. Chen also greeted politely, hello, Ms. Tao. The embarrassing scene of the blind date has come. After a moment of silence, the matchmaker smiled and said, "You two can chat casually. I, the matchmaker, will go out for a walk first." The matchmaker said and walked out waving her handkerchief. Only Mr. Chen and Tao Min'er were left in the private room. After another moment of silence, Mr. Chen said in a gentle voice, "What kind of cakes does Ms. Tao like to eat?" Tao Min'er was stunned for a moment and casually said the names of two cakes, jujube paste cakes, tea cakes. Ms. Chen nodded, turned his head and ordered, "Prepare some jujube paste cakes and tea cakes." The attendant guarding the door immediately went to prepare after hearing this. Good night. The prince longs for me every night after mastering thought reading. Author, Gongzi Yun Si. Chapter 642. Tao Minor was stunned for a few seconds when she saw Mr. Chen's behavior. She thought Mr. Chen was asking casually, so she answered casually. She didn't expect him to ask someone to buy it immediately. She couldn't help but look at Mr. Chen in front of her a few more times. He had regular features and good clothes. Although he was not as handsome as Song Tanhua, he was also handsome. Mr. Chen asked, "Miss Tao, do you need more tea?" Tao Minor looked down at the teacup when she heard it. The tea was already at the bottom. When she was embarrassed just now, she used tea to ease the embarrassment. She looked up at the teapot on the table. When she reached out to pick it up, Mr. Chen got there first. He smiled and said, "I'll do it." Tao Minor was stunned again. Mr. Chen picked up the teapot and filled the teacup in front of Tao Minor with water. Then he also filled a cup of tea for himself. When the teapot was put back, there was no sound. Tao Minor didn't know what to say for a moment. She looked at the teacup in front of her, picked it up and raised it to her lips to take a sip. At this time, the attendant also bought the cakes, put them on the table and left. Mr. Chen looked up at Tao Minor and said softly, "Miss Tao, please have some." Tao Minor saw the jujube paste cakes and tea cakes and said, "Thank you." Then she reached into the plate, picked up a piece of jujube paste cake, put it into her mouth, took a bite, chewed it slowly and swallowed it. Mr. Chen looked at Tao Minor eating the cakes, picked up the teacup and handed it to her lips and took a sip. This blind date felt better than before. Mr. Chen was well educated and polite, and he also cared about her, which did not disgust her. After saying goodbye to each other, Tao Minor sat in the sedan chair. Mr. Chen stood at the door of Wuzixuan, watched Tao Minor leave, and then turned around and got on the carriage. As soon as Tao Minor returned home, Tao's father and Wang surrounded her and asked about the result of the blind date. "Minor, what do you think of Mr. Chen? Are you satisfied with him? It's not important whether he looks handsome or not, what's important is his character. Minor, what do you think?" Tao Minor looked up at her parents in front of her, thinking of Mr. Chen. She just said lightly, "Mr. Chen is handsome and a good person." Tao's father was happy to hear that. "That's good, Minor is interested in him." Tao Minor said, "Mr. Chen is very good, but not as good as Mr. Song." Tao's father. Wang. Tao's father sighed, "Minor, how can anyone compare to Mr. Song? You think Mr. Chen is good, why don't you give it a try first?" Wang glared at Tao's father, "What do you mean by try first? Marriage is a big deal, how can you try it?" Tao's father explained, "How can I let Minor try to get married? I mean, let Minor and Mr. Chen get to know each other more, drink tea together, get to know each other first, and then decide on the marriage if you think it's okay." Wang's expression eased and said, "Minor, I think what your father said makes sense. Do you want to try it?" Tao Minor was silent for a long time, then raised her head and looked at her parents again, nodded, "Yeah." Tao's father said happily, "That's good. How can you have feelings at the first sight? Love grows over time. If you spend more time together, won't you have feelings?" Wang reminded, Min'er, it's a good thing to spend more time together, but you can't be alone together, okay? Tao Min'er was stunned at first, then reacted and blushed, I know, mother. Wang was a little relieved, Min'er is already a big girl, and there are limits in matters between men and women. Don't let outsiders have a handle. Tao Min nodded and said, Madam is still thoughtful. Min'er must take Ding Xiang with her when she goes out, okay. Tao Min'er nodded, I know, parents. Tanhua Mansion. Song Tanhua was reading a book last night and accidentally caught a cold. He had a high fever when he woke up in the morning. He had never asked for leave before, but he asked for leave today as an exception. After taking the medicine in the morning, he slept until noon. When he woke up, Song Tanhua felt a splitting headache. He raised his hand and touched his forehead, and found that it was hotter than in the morning. Gun pushed the door open and saw that his master had woken up. He took a few steps forward and asked with some concern, Master, are you feeling better? Song Tanhua shook his head, you go and invite the doctor. I'll go right away, Gun trotted out. When the doctor came, Song Tanhua was already dizzy. After taking the pulse, he wrote a new prescription. After Gun boiled the medicine, he fed it to Song Tanhua little by little. Song Tanhua slept in a daze for a day. His fever subsided a little at night, but he was still soft and weak all over. He just took 2 more days off to recuperate at home. Tao Min'er had tea with Master Chen at Wuxixuan these 2 days. Master Chen took the initiative to invite her and prepared her favorite tea fruit and jujube paste cake. Mr. Chen's attentiveness and attitude were revealed everywhere. After drinking tea, Mr. Chen suggested, Miss Tao, I heard that the plum blossoms in Qin Garden are in full bloom. Do you want to go to appreciate the plum blossoms together? Tao Min'er hesitated for a while. After spending a few times together, Mr. Chen had a good impression of her. They were going to get married, so it was not wrong to go to appreciate the plum blossoms, so she nodded. Mr. Chen smiled, stood up, and took Tao Min'er out of Wuxixuan. Ding Xiang followed her young lady slowly. Qin Garden was not far from here, and it didn't take long to get there. When we walked into Qin Garden, the red plum blossoms were in full bloom, and the biting cold wind could not stop the young men and women who came to appreciate the plum blossoms. Mr. Chen glanced at the plum blossoms in front of him, turned back to look at Tao Min'er, and reminded her in a gentle voice, Miss Tao, be careful of the slippery road. It was the coldest month of winter, and it snowed last night. Snow water accumulated in the potholes on the road, and it froze into ice overnight. Tao Min'er looked down and found a piece of ice in front of her. If Mr. Chen hadn't reminded her, she would have stepped on it. After she raised her feet and walked around, she raised her head and looked at Mr. Chen, thank you, Mr. Chen, for reminding me. Mr. Chen smiled and said, Miss Tao, you're welcome. Let's continue admiring the plum blossoms. Tao Min'er smiled and responded, okay. Mr. Chen saw Tao Min'er smiling. He smiled and led Tao Min'er towards the depths of the plum blossoms. There were many people admiring the plum blossoms around. As soon as I got closer, someone came up to say hello. Isn't this Mr. Chen? I'm very busy lately, why do you still have time to come out to appreciate the plum blossoms? As the man spoke, he looked at the girl next to Mr. Chen and asked curiously, Mr. Chen, who is this? Mr. Chen glanced sideways at Tao Min'er and introduced with a smile, Tao Min'er, the daughter of the Tao family, is here to enjoy the plum blossoms. Later, Mr. Chen introduced to Tao Min'er, Miss Tao, he is my good friend Xiao Tai. Xiao Tai cupped his fists and bowed, hello, Miss Tao. Tao Min'er lowered her head slightly, hello, Mr. Xiao. Xiao Tai looked at Tao Min'er and then looked at Mr. Chen with a smile, Mr. Chen, why don't we go to enjoy the plum blossoms together? Mr. Luo and the others are also here. After hearing this, Mr. Chen lowered his eyes and looked at Tao Min'er, Following her opinion, Miss Tao, what do you think? Tao Minor glanced at Chiao Tai. If she refused, Mr. Chen would definitely be embarrassed. She thought for a while and said, okay. Chiao Tai said with a smile, the plum blossoms are in full bloom today, and many literati and scholars come to enjoy the plum blossoms. Indeed, I heard that there will be heavy snow in the past 2 days, and there will be more people there. Mr. Chen lowered his eyes and looked at Tao Minor. Miss Tao, are you free these 2 days? If it snows, let's enjoy the plum blossoms together. The proud snow and cold plum blossoms are a beautiful sight in winter. Tao Minor agreed readily, okay. Mr. Chen smiled and continued walking. After walking for a while, I met Mr. Luo and others, and Mr. Chen talked with them. Miss Tao stood aside, just watching quietly without saying a word. Listening to the content of his chat, Tao Minor couldn't help but laugh out loud, which attracted the attention of several young masters. Mr. Chen saw Tao Minor smiling and couldn't help but praise, Miss Tao has a beautiful smile. Tao Minor blushed when she heard this and lowered her eyes. Mr. Chen saw her blushing, smiled and looked back at the plum blossoms in front of him, and said, today's plum blossoms are not half as colorful as Miss Tao. Hearing this, Tao Minor raised her head and followed Mr. Chen's gaze. She saw several red plum blossoms blooming on the branches, which were alluringly red. Chiao Tai's laughter came to his ears. Mr. Chen is so good at complimenting others. Could it be that he has taken a liking to Miss Tao? Before Chiao Tai finished speaking, Mr. Luo and others also started making noises. Master Chen, are you interested in this girl? Tao Minor looked at the young masters in front of her with unnatural expressions on her face. How could she ask these questions in front of others? Mr. Chen couldn't help but smile, and look sideways at Tao Minor for a few times. Maybe he noticed her discomfort, so he reminded them warmly, okay, don't say anything. Chiao Tai still smiled and joked, you are protecting Mr. Chen now. If you marry him back home in the future, will you not be pampered by God? Tao Minor heard this and glanced at Mr. Chen. He lowered his head and smiled, then raised his head again. Mr. Chiao talked a lot today. I understand, Chiao Tai said as if he understood. After admiring the plum blossoms, the group left Kainyuan. Chiao Tai took Mr. Chen to have a drink. Mr. Chen found it hard to resist his hospitality and felt a little embarrassed. Tao Minor knew that it was normal for friends and family to get together and drink. Chen, go ahead, I'll go back first. Miss Tao, Mr. Chen hesitated. Tao Minor explained, it's getting late. If I don't go back, my parents will be worried. Mr. Chen pondered for a moment and reminded, Miss Tao, be careful on the road. Yes, Tao Minor responded and sat in the sedan. After Tao Minor walked away, Chiao Tai looked back at Mr. Chen and asked curiously, Mr. Chen, is that Miss Tao really coming out of the palace? Mr. Chen nodded, well, I stayed in the East Palace for a few years and just came out not long ago. Mr. Luo also asked curiously, then did she and the prince consummate their marriage? Mr. Chen thought for a while and said, I heard not. Chiao Tai said, but having said that, is the prince really loyal as rumored? He only dotes on the princess and doesn't like other women? Although Miss Tao is not a beautiful woman, her appearance is not bad, and the prince has never touched her. Mr. Luo smiled and said, then you don't understand. The most indispensable thing in the palace is beauty. When Miss Tao enters the beauty's nest, she will naturally be inferior. Besides, only Miss Tao knows whether she has slept with her. Chiao Tai looked at Mr. Chen with curiosity again. Mr. Chen, do you really plan to marry Miss Tao? Mr. Chen raised his eyebrows. Well, why should I bother if I don't marry her? Chiao Tai sighed. Mr. Chen is not afraid of Miss Tao. I heard that the Tao family is very rich, and the most indispensable thing is money. There are many people who want to be the Tao family's son-in-law. Which is more important, Women or money, Mr. Luo said with a smile. Mr. Chen smiled and said, let's go drink first and chat while drinking. Chiao Tai shouted, let's go have a drink together. When Tao Minor returned home, as expected, she was surrounded by Father Tao and Mrs. Wang. Tao's father asked, Minor, how do you feel? Tao Minor recalled the 2 days of getting along with each other. She had a good impression of Mr. Chen's measured advances and retreats, his graceful demeanor. It feels okay. Father Tao felt that there would be a chance this time, and continued happily, the matchmaker came to ask questions today. You are not young anymore, and Mr. Chen is very satisfied with you. If you think it is okay, agree to this marriage, get engaged first, and get married next spring. What do you think? Tao Minor was stunned for a moment. She didn't expect to get engaged and married so soon. Yes, it has always been like this, but she has read too many romance novels, so she has this feeling. Wang said, Minor, don't you think Mr. Chen is good? Are you still dissatisfied? Tao Minor pursed her lips and thought of Song Tanhua. She and Song Tanhua were destined to be from different worlds. Mr. Chen really gave her a good feeling. It might not be possible to love each other without doubt, but respecting each other like guests might be possible. After hesitating for a long time, she looked up at her parents and finally agreed to this marriage. I agree. Then I will go back to the matchmaker now and discuss the engagement in the next 2 days. Father Tao happily went to find the matchmaker. Wang held her daughter's hand, feeling distressed and reluctant. She felt distressed that her daughter could not marry the one she loved, and she was reluctant to let her daughter marry into another family and become a member of another family. The date of engagement was quickly set, 3 days later. Song Tanhua rested for 3 days, and his cold was almost cured, but he was a little weak. He went to the palace early this morning. Feng Wu had been asking about Song Tanhua these days, and found that Song Tanhua had been ill for a few days. Today, Song Tanhua entered the palace, and Qin Xiao came to report. Crown Princess, Song Tanhua is here. Privately, Chengzi and Qin Xiao mentioned that the Crown Princess was looking for Song Tanhua, and he had always remembered it. Today, he saw Song Tanhua coming to teach Dao Tao, so he came to remind him as soon as possible. Feng Wu went to the next door after hearing this. As soon as she walked into the study, she heard Song Tanhua's slightly hoarse voice. She looked up and saw Song Tanhua's thin figure standing in front of Dao Tao, and the picture looked like he was checking homework. After the inspection, Feng Wu called Song Tanhua out. After Song Tanhua came out, he bowed and said, Crown Princess, do you have something to ask me? Feng Wu didn't beat around the bush and asked directly, Tao Minor asked you out for tea that day, why didn't you go? Song Tanhua was stunned at first, but then he realized that Tao Minor had a good relationship with the Crown Princess, so it was normal for her to know. Replying to the Crown Princess, the prince was delayed in seeing me that day. When I left the palace to go to Wuzixuan, Miss Tao had already left. I made her wait too long. Feng Wu waited with me that day, and she knew how long it took. After waiting for so long, I didn't see Song Tanhua come to the appointment. Tao Minor thought Song Tanhua didn't want to come. Good night.